Chapter 1, Transmigration and Blood Moss. When Guya woke up, his brain felt dazed. He remembered having just closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, the pungent smell of low-quality disinfectant rushed straight to his head. His vision gradually focused under the dim yellow emergency light. It was a cramped basement. He was wearing a thick, bulky, gray-black one-piece hazmat suit. Several people in front of him, also wearing hazmat suits, were standing with their backs to him, mechanically scraping the walls with scrapers, making a rustling sound. "Where is this?" Before Guya could react, he received a solid kick to his rear. "Intern, what are you spacing out for? Do the blood moss samples on the wall grow legs and run into the recycling box by themselves?" He turned around with a start. Standing behind him was a middle-aged man with a fleshy face, wearing an old tactical vest over his hazmat suit, with a line of fading red paint sprayed on his chest. Jingchen Security Outsourcing Squad 7 Wang Zhengguo. Guya stared at those words, his brain feeling as if it had been fiercely stirred by something. Captain Wang. This address practically rolled out from under his tongue on its own. As soon as the words fell, a large amount of unfamiliar memories flooded into his mind. The Great Fracture, New Era Year 30, the High Wall, Sea Ring Zone, Jingchen Security Outsourcing Company. As the severe pain eased, a bitter smile tugged at Guya's pale face. He had figured out his situation. He had become an orphan living in Rustbone Street, in the Sea Ring Zone outside the Human Federation High Wall, a blacklisted resident who didn't even have a citizen ID from inside the wall. And his current identity was an intern cleaner for the Jingchen Security Outsourcing Company. To put it plainly, it meant acting as a supernatural janitor for those in white coats inside the high wall. Their range of activity was mostly buildings on the city's edge, marked by the authorities as low risk. The work content was hardly respectable, nothing more than scraping wall skin, dredging gutters, bagging insects, and carefully packing up those newly grown, foul-smelling research materials to return to the company. Occasionally, they would receive some lucrative jobs, going to a site that was supposedly cleared by big shots to conduct a secondary safety review. To translate that, "We aren't sure if it's really safe there, you cheap goods, go in and step around to test it first." An absolutely high-risk job, trading life for money. But this salary, paid on the spot, was barely enough for him to rent a bed in the slums and occasionally have a glass of low-quality liquor at a rundown tavern. What are you standing there for? If the quantity of recovered items this time doesn't meet the standard again, don't even think about getting a single cent of this month's rating bonus. Old Wang cursed again and threw him a small data pad strapped to his wrist. F-Class Contaminant Recovery Operation Guide. Guya swiped the screen, and the first page showed what they were supposed to recover today. Recovery target, F-Class Anomaly, Blood Moss Sample. Characteristics. Possesses weak biological activity, will slowly proliferate, long-term contact will lead to mossification of human tissue. Operation regulations. 1. Strictly forbidden to touch with bare hands. 2. Must wear spirit isolation gloves to scrape. 3. During operation, strictly forbidden to stare at the sample's active points for more than 30 seconds. Guya looked at the regulation, strictly forbidden to stare for more than 30 seconds, and his eyelids twitched. Is this the cleaner's code of conduct? Just then, a cold, emotionless mechanical voice rang directly in his mind. Host soul stability detected. Bizarre compendium officially activated. Scanning surrounding environment. Contained object discovered. F-class anomaly contaminated blood, residue. Containment condition. Host must scrape it off by hand and consume it. Yes. He wondered if he hadn't woken up yet. Consume it? He looked up at that thing on the wall. It was a dark red, flocculent substance that looked like moldy pig's blood, slowly wriggling and contracting against the wall. Just looking at it made his stomach churn. "Brother Ai, what are you spacing out for? Hurry up and work." A crisp female voice came. A fuzzy, short-haired head poked out from the ventilation duct above. It was the team's vanguard, Lin Zioki. She was crouching on it like an agile cat, making a face at him. Her name was Lin Zioki, nicknamed Sparrow, the team's vanguard and everyone's ray of sunshine. "That's right, Ai, if you don't start working, Auntie Liu Fang will nag you about slacking off again." A tall, thin young man next to him also leaned over. His name was Li Fei, nicknamed Monkey, the team's assaulter. In the distance, a thin young man wearing thick glasses was crouching on the ground, meticulously calibrating the detector in his hand. That was the technician Chen Hao. And a chubby woman in her 40s was scraping the wall while muttering complaints about how there wasn't even a trace of grease in today's ration meal. That was the logistics worker, Liu Fang. Old Wang, Sparrow, Monkey, Glasses, Auntie, and himself. These were all the members of Squad 7. Guya watched his teammates' busy figures, then looked at the blood moss on the wall, his heart warring within him. Eat or not eat? If he didn't eat, what if this suddenly appeared codex was his transmigration cheat? If he ate, what if this was an illusion and eating it actually caused a problem? He gritted his teeth. Gamble it. In this hellhole, any opportunity that could change his destiny could not be missed. Captain Wang, my stomach is a bit uncomfortable. I'm going to rest in that corner for a while. Guya clutched his stomach, feigning a look of pain. Old Wang waved his hand impatiently. So much trouble, go quickly and come back quickly. Guya felt as if he had been granted amnesty and hurriedly ran to a blind spot in the basement filled with debris. He took a deep breath, drew his specialized scraper from his waist, carefully approached the wall and scraped off a piece the size of a fingernail from another patch of blood moss. The moment that thing detached from the wall, it twitched slightly on the scraper. Guya's scalp tingled, but he steeled his heart, closed his eyes, and shoved the scraper directly into his mouth, wiped it, and swallowed. An indescribable, cold, fishy, and foul taste exploded in his mouth instantly. He resisted the urge to vomit and swallowed that thing down. The next second, a cold energy, like countless tiny insects, crawled down his esophagus and into his limbs and bones. Containment successful. Detected that the contained entity is living type. Generating transformation card. Obtained F-class anomaly, contaminated blood. Ability, liquefaction, can turn the body into a liquid form for a short time, immune to some physical impact during liquefaction, and can pass through extremely narrow gaps. Note, you taste like a piece of mud stained with rust. Codex function unlocked, form synchronization. Hint, when the host performs a transformation card, transformation, the codex will treat the non-living items the host is wearing as an extension of the body and perform synchronized alienation. During the transformation, the items will merge into the new form. After the transformation is lifted, the items will automatically return to their original state. It worked, and it even solved the embarrassing problem of clothes exploding during transformation. Guya felt a surge of wild joy. But immediately after, a wave of dizziness hit him. The side effects of consuming the anomaly were setting in, his face turned deathly pale, he broke out in a cold sweat, and he had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "You brat, what are you dawdling there for?" Old Wang's roar came. He looked up and saw Old Wang's face, which was full of displeasure. "You brat!" Old Wang stared at Guya's pale face, his brows instantly furrowing. He grabbed Guya's wrist, roughly pried open his mouth, and looked at his tongue. "Damn it, have you been contaminated?" Guya was shocked and just wanted to explain. Old Wang had already pulled a military canteen from his waist, unscrewed the lid, and poured it into his mouth without saying a word. Gulp, gulp. A liquid as pungent and astringent as toilet cleaner choked directly into Guya's throat. Cough, cough, cough. Guya was choked to the point of tears. "This is the purification fluid issued by the company. It's super expensive." Old Wang viciously screwed the cap back on the canteen and cursed. "Remember, in our line of work, life is more important than money. Don't you dare refuse to use it just to save a few company supplies." After cursing, he didn't know where he pulled out a fruit candy from and rudely stuffed it into Guya's mouth. "Get to work." Old Wang turned and left. The autumn wind blowing in from the basement ventilation duct felt like a knife, scraping against his back soaked with sweat, making him shiver uncontrollably. Guya held the slightly sweet candy in his mouth, watching Old Wang's bear-like back, then touched his own rumbly stomach, his heart filled with mixed feelings. This world, it didn't seem so bad after all. Chapter 2, Stealing Food and the First Lesson. The fruit candy in his mouth quickly dissolved. That sweetness, however, couldn't suppress the strange taste of the purification liquid lingering in his throat. Guya retched twice, feeling a little better. In his mind, the codex interface was still there. Designed somewhat like an old-fashioned card game, on a dusty gray background, only one card was lit up. On the card, a constantly wriggling dark red liquid was depicted, with a few lines of small text below it. Bizarre, contaminated blood. Level F. Ability, liquefaction. Status, transformable. Description, a puddle of mud with its own consciousness. Don't let it touch you, or it will seep into your pores and turn you into the same rotten thing from the inside out. Guya poked the transformable button with his mind. Transformation will consume mental energy. Are you sure? Mental energy. As soon as this thought crossed his mind, he felt a needle-like prick in his head, making him a little dizzy. Current mental energy, 710. Transforming into contaminated blood requires 1 point of mental energy to activate and subsequently consumes 1 point per minute. So there was a blue bar limit. Guya pondered that he couldn't carelessly try this thing now. What if he transformed and couldn't change back, or transformed into a puddle of liquid in front of everyone? That would be a huge joke. Yi, are you okay? Captain Wang's purification liquid is really potent. Lin Zioki, like a little cat, quietly crept over, her big eyes full of concern. I'm fine, just a bit nauseous. Guya quickly waved his hand, forcing a smile that was uglier than crying. Here. Lin Zioki, without explanation, shoved something into his hand. It's anti-contamination chocolate from Monkey G. Eat it quickly, it can help suppress it. He's not. He couldn't bear to eat his own share, he saved it for you, Lin Zioki made a face. Hurry up, don't let Captain Wang see it, or he'll scold us for being lazy again. Guya held the chocolate, wrapped in oil paper and a bit lumpy, feeling warm inside. From the original owner's memories, he knew how precious this thing was. In the black market of Rust Bone Street, such a small piece could be exchanged for 3 packets of nutrient paste, enough for an adult's rations for 2 days. These were his current family. A group of ordinary people living on the edge, struggling at the bottom of society. Yet they would share their limited warmth with each other. He took a deep breath and put the chocolate into his mouth. A strange taste, a mix of cocoa and some kind of herb, spread in his mouth. Although it didn't taste good, the churning feeling in his stomach was indeed significantly suppressed. Let's go, time to work. He patted his face, picked up the scraper again, and joined the team cleaning the blood moss. Perhaps to distract himself, he worked exceptionally hard this time. The scraper dug into the wall again and again, shoveling the wriggling dark red things into sealed contamination recycling bags. 1-2, detected homologous bizarre energy, absorb. The codex's voice sounded again. Guya's heart stirred. Absorb? Absorption can be used to strengthen contained bizarre entities or replenish the host's mental energy. Such a good thing exists. He remained calm, scraping while silently thinking. Absorb, replenish mental energy. Absorbing. Mental energy plus 0, 0, 1. Mental energy plus 0, 0, 1. A faint but continuous cool sensation slowly seeped into his brain from the hand holding the scraper. Although the amount increased each time was pitifully small, that dizzy feeling in his head was indeed lessening little by little. So that's how it is. This codex not only could eat, but also drink soup. Guya immediately felt more confident. As long as he continued this line of work, he could quietly become stronger by processing these scraps. This was simply a tailor-made path of Loki development for him. Thinking of this, he worked even more vigorously. More than an hour later, all the blood moss in the basement had been thoroughly cleaned. Auntie Liu Fang used a special spray to douse the entire basement, and only then did the bloody smell in the air completely dissipate. Quitting time. Old Wang roared, and everyone, as if pardoned, quickly took off their bulky protective helmets, breathing heavily. Fatigue was etched on everyone's faces, but their eyes also held a hint of relief after completing the mission. Guya glanced at his codex. Mental energy, 10/10. It had completely recovered. This was a huge profit. Yi, you're pretty good today, quick and efficient. Monkey Lee Fei came over and slapped him on the back, almost making him stumble. Exactly, much better than this lazy monkey, Lin Zioki also said with a smile coming closer. Even Glasses Chen Hao, who had been silent, nodded at him. Only Old Wang snorted, unclear whether it was a compliment or a scolding. Guya chuckled, saying nothing. He knew he was slowly integrating into this small team. All right, stop messing around, pack up your things, and let's go back. Old Wang waved his hand and led the way to the basement exit. Everyone responded and began to pack their tools. Guyu was the last, bending down to pick up a recycling bag on the ground. Out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly caught sight of a corner blocked by clutter. There was a small patch of dark red. A straggler? His heart stirred, thinking he couldn't waste it, so he called out to Old Wang. "Captain Wang, there's still a bit left here, I'll be right there." With that, he grabbed the recycling bag and walked over. It was a small patch of blood moss, about the size of a palm, stuck behind a discarded iron cabinet. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't find it at all. Guyu skillfully took out the scraper, ready to scrape. Suddenly, he stopped. He noticed that the color of this blood moss was much deeper than those they had previously dealt with, almost black. Moreover, it wasn't wriggling. It just lay there quietly, like a solidified blood scab. Something was wrong. Guyu's hair stood on end instantly. He slowly retreated. Just then, in the center of that black blood scab, an eye slowly opened, a turbid, bloodshot eye filled with malice and hunger. That wasn't a contaminant. That was the bizarre entity's true form. It wasn't dead. Captain Wang. Guyu screamed with all his might, but it was already too late. The moment that eye locked onto him, an invisible, icy force choked his throat, rendering him speechless. The sensation of suffocation instantly surged. That blood scab detached from the wall, transforming into a viscous black liquid and flowed rapidly towards him. Run! Only this thought remained in Guyu's mind. But his feet were as if frozen to the ground, unable to move a single step. It's over. Was he going to die right after transmigrating? Just at this critical moment, the codex interface flashed wildly before his eyes. Fatal threat detected. Consume 1 point of mental energy to transform into contaminated blood. Transform, Guyu roared frantically in his mind. The next second, he felt his bones, muscles, and skin melt instantly. The feeling was indescribable, like turning into a cup of water spilled on the ground. His vision suddenly dropped to the ground. He saw his body turn into a dark red liquid, identical to the blood moss he had swallowed before, and the force that had choked his throat disappeared instantly, having lost its physical target. Aye. Old Wang and his teammates' exclamations came from afar, but Guyu could no longer care. The black liquid had already flowed in front of him. He could feel the devouring desire emanating from it. He couldn't let it touch him. Guyu used his mind to control his water form, desperately flowing towards a dusty vent gap nearby. The black liquid pursued closely from behind. Faster, a little faster. Finally, before being caught, he flowed through the narrow vent grill. Boom. With a loud bang, the black liquid violently crashed against the iron grill, creating a dent. Hiding in the pipe, Guyu finally breathed a sigh of relief. A narrow escape. For the first time, he so clearly felt the horror of this world. Mental energy, 9/10. Mental energy was rapidly depleting in his mind. He had to change back as soon as possible. But the black monster outside was still slamming into the vent. What should he do? Chapter 3 Loot. The ventilation shaft was dark and narrow, and the dust accumulated over who knows how many years made one want to sneeze. Of course, Guyu didn't have a nose right now. He was just a puddle of liquid. He stuck to the cold metal, clearly feeling every impact from the thing outside. Clang. Clang. The sounds grew louder with each strike, and the metal grill of the vent was severely deformed, on the verge of giving way. Mental strength, 9/10. The codex's alert sounded in his mind like a death knell. If he didn't find a solution soon, once his mental strength was depleted, he would be forced back into human form. At that point, a living person appearing out of thin air in this narrow pipe. The image was too beautiful for Guyu to contemplate. Not to mention, there was a hungry kindred outside waiting for a snack. What to do? A direct confrontation was definitely out of the question. Even though he was also a puddle of liquid now, his color was several shades lighter than the other one, clearly indicating malnutrition. If he really went out to wrestle with it, he'd probably end up being slurped up like jelly. Guyu forced himself to calm down. Just then, the black liquid, which had been frantically hitting the wall, suddenly stopped. It seemed to have realized that this method was foolish. Immediately after, the puddle of black liquid was changing its form. It was becoming thinner and more fluid. It remembered. It could also liquefy. Damn it. Guyu cursed inwardly. Without hesitation, he immediately controlled his liquid body to silently slide deeper into the ventilation shaft. This place was like a labyrinth with paths in all directions. He bypassed the main duct, taking a branch pipe full of cobwebs, and made his way towards his teammate's location. Over there, fire. Just then, behind him, Old Man Wang's steady roar like a solid rock suddenly rang out, immediately after. Bang, bang, bang. Gunshots and dazzling muzzle flashes instantly erupted in the basement. The puddle of black liquid, which was about to flow into the ventilation duct, was instantly interrupted by this sudden attack. It let out an angry hiss. It abandoned Guyi in the duct. Instead, it pounced towards Old Man Wang and his team, where the firepower was more concentrated. Guyi knew. His teammates had arrived. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately sped up. Soon, he found another vent. This vent was located at the other end of the basement, in a storage room filled with discarded medical equipment, its position extremely hidden. He flowed out through the gaps in the grill and quickly reverted to human form in the dark corner. Mental strength, 710. His head throbbed slightly with a needle-like pain, but Guyi couldn't dwell on it. He quickly slipped out of the storage room. Without anyone noticing, he quietly returned to the back of the team, next to Auntie Liu Fang and Chen Hao. "Yi, where did you run off to? You scared me to death." Auntie Liu Fang saw him and pulled him behind the cover. "The situation wasn't right just now, so I hid first." Guyi lowered his voice, feigning a look of lingering fear. "You did well." Chen Hao, who was usually quiet, even spoke up for once. Outsourced Personnel Safety Regulations Article 7. When encountering uncleared active anomalies, the primary task is self-concealment, not causing trouble for the team. Guyi nodded, but his mind was rapidly analyzing the battle. The battle in the hall had already begun, but it was completely different from the chaos he had imagined. Monkey, use a flashbang at point C to interfere with its visual perception. Captain Wang's voice, as steady as a rock, echoed through the basement. Received. Li Fei, Monkey, poked half his body out from behind a cover and threw a specially made flashbang. A dazzling white light instantly erupted, and the puddle of black contaminated blood clearly paused, its liquid surface churning wildly, obviously stimulated by the strong light. Zio Qi, it stopped. Attack from above, target its gel core. Understood. Lin Zioki's voice came from the beam above their heads. She had climbed to a high position at some point, holding a small crossbow. The arrowheads were coated with a liquid that emitted a faint silver glow. Whoosh! The crossbow bolt pierced the air, accurately hitting the flickering red light spot within the black liquid. Screech. The monster let out an angry hiss, but it didn't suffer a fatal wound. Beautiful, Captain Wang praised, then continued to order. Its main core isn't there. Glasses, report the energy coordinates. It's 30 centimeters off the ground. To its lower left, the contamination reading is highest there. Chen Hao adjusted his glasses, staring intently at the detector in his hand, which had returned to normal. This was the fighting style of Squad 7. Monkey was responsible for harassment and distraction, Sparrow for high-altitude suppression and probing, Glasses for intelligence analysis and weakness identification, and finally, the captain for the fatal blow. And Guyi had also found his place at this moment. "Captain Wang," he suddenly spoke, his voice not loud but clear enough. "It seems to be liquefying. It wants to burrow into the ground." This judgment wasn't a guess. It was the most instinctive reaction he had felt from a kindred anomaly when injured. While he was transformed into the contaminated blood, if you can't beat it, run. Almost at the instant his words fell, Captain Wang also noticed the monster's unusual movement. After being shot in the fake core, the puddle of black liquid was no longer violent but rapidly, seeping into the ground, about to disappear into the floor cracks. Once it burrowed in, finding it again would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. "Damn it, trying to run?" Captain Wang cursed angrily, pulling out the precious purification bullet from his pocket without hesitation. "Monkey. Zio Qi, suppress it with crossfire and force it out. Don't let it burrow. If this thing gets away, all our recycled material commission, for this time, will be gone." Li Fei and Lin Zioki immediately complied, using a special repellent bullet, a bullet that emits sound waves and light that anomalies detest, to block all escape routes for the contaminated blood. The monster was forced to roll wildly in place, appearing extremely agitated. Everything was ready, just waiting for Captain Wang to fire the fatal purification bullet. However, just then, an unexpected change occurred. "Captain, no!" Chen Hao's voice suddenly turned panicked. Its energy fluctuations are rapidly increasing. It's autophagizing. It wants to detonate its core. Captain Wang's face changed drastically. He knew what this meant. Some anomalies, before dying, would choose to detonate the most core source of contamination within their bodies, creating a small-scale contamination explosion. The power wasn't great, but it was enough to contaminate all the equipment here and render all their blood moss samples for this recovery mission useless. Most importantly, once it self-destructed, the most valuable protoplast of this contaminated blood would completely dissipate. That was a trophy that could sell for at least 300 credit points in commission. No one wanted to see that go to waste. They had to interrupt its autolysis process before it detonated. But during autolysis, its main core would be enveloped by chaotic energy, making it impossible for the purification bullet to hit accurately. Damn it, I'll risk it. Captain Wang raised his gun, ready to make a desperate gamble. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. However, at this critical moment, Gu Yi, who had been hiding in the back, suddenly spoke. His voice was not loud, but it was unusually calm and clearly reached everyone's ears. Captain Wang, attack the position about 15 centimeters to its upper right. That's its weakness. Attacking there can interrupt its autophagy for at least 2 seconds. Everyone was stunned, including Captain Wang. Weakness? There's such a thing? The instruction manual never mentioned it. Kid, you goddamn, Captain Wang subconsciously wanted to curse. But when he saw Guya's unusually calm and confident eyes, his curse got stuck in his throat. He didn't know why, in that instant, he chose to trust this usually quiet intern. Perhaps this was a veteran's intuition. Without the slightest hesitation, his muzzle instantly adjusted, shifting from aiming at the core to the position Guyi had indicated. Bang! The gunshot was no longer a purification bullet, but an ordinary repellent bullet. The bullet accurately hit that spot. A miraculous scene unfolded. The violently churning black liquid seemed to have been paused. The chaotic energy that was about to erupt was truly interrupted. And during this process, the main core within its body, which had been enveloped by chaotic energy, was clearly and openly exposed. Now, Captain Wang didn't even need anyone to remind him. Bang! The second gunshot was like a judgment from the Grim Reaper. The silver bullet passed through the time-delayed energy field, accurately embedding itself into the exposed core. The puddle of black liquid first twitched violently, boiling, as if all the energy within its body was purified and neutralized in an instant. Immediately after, it rapidly contracted and solidified at a visible speed. Finally, it left behind a human head-sized, black jelly-like, still slightly trembling gelatinous solid on the ground. The battle was over. Phew! Only heavy breathing remained in the entire basement. Well done. Li Fei was the first to jump out from behind cover, his eyes gleaming as he looked at the trophy. Damn it, at least we didn't let it self-destruct. Now our recycled material commission is secure. Aunt Liu. Wang Zhengguo also breathed a sigh of relief and immediately gave an order. Sample recovery box. Be careful, even though this thing is dead, it still has trace contamination. All right. Auntie Liu Fang happily responded, taking out a silver metal briefcase with a spirit isolation symbol from her logistics bag. She put on thickened spirit isolation gloves and carefully used a long-handled sample clamp to place the still trembling, black jelly into the briefcase, then locked it with a click. Looking at the briefcase full of trophies, everyone's faces showed genuine smiles. This trip was not in vain. Ai, how did you know? Li Fei finally remembered and came over, asking curiously. I don't know either. Gu Yi appropriately showed an expression of lingering fear and confusion, scratching his head. Just now, I just felt like that spot seemed a bit off. Of course, he wouldn't say that the so-called weakness was a difference in information that he had perceived from the perspective of a kindred anomaly when he was transformed into the contaminated blood, the most fragile relay station in the opponent's energy circulation. This was an information disparity that only his unique anomaly perspective could discern. Captain Wang gave him a deep, thoughtful look. He walked over to confirm that the protoplast had been properly recovered, then walked back to Gu Yi, his expression serious. Kid, this time, you not only saved everyone's bonus for this month, but you also earned us an extra commission of at least 300 credit points. He paused, his voice becoming solemn. According to the rules, a new recruit who makes a great contribution can be promoted early. From today on, you are no longer an intern. He pulled out 3 brand new silver purification bullets from his pocket and put them in Guya's hand. These 3 bullets are your promotion reward and your life-saving money. Work hard from now on. Woohoo, I got promoted. Monkey and Sparrow both cheered. This joy was for Guye and also for their own bulging wallets. Chapter 4, The Era of High Walls. The commuter bus's engine rumbled like an old man panting. The carriage was filled with a strange smell, a mix of disinfectant, rust, and engine oil, drilling straight into their noses. The smell wasn't pleasant, but for some reason, smelling it brought a sense of peace. It was as if it could separate them from the deadly world outside. No one in the bus spoke. Everyone was so exhausted, who had the energy to argue? Wang Zhengguo, Old Man Wang, sat in the passenger seat, silently lighting a mint cigarette. The swirling smoke obscured his tired face. Outside the window, the shadows of dilapidated buildings flickered, making the wrinkles on his face appear deeper and shallower. Lin Zioki had long since fallen asleep, curled up in a corner with tears still clinging to her eyelashes. Auntie Liu Fang pulled out her personal terminal and looked at her daughter's photo, a rare hint of tenderness on her face. Chen Hao Glasses was still the same, huddled in the innermost corner, head down, tinkering with his detector, its screen a spiderweb of cracks. Gu Yi sat among them. He couldn't sleep. Every jolt of the bus made him feel like his bones were shaking too. He quietly raised his hand and curled his fingers. That sensation of turning into a puddle of mud and sliding through a ventilation shaft seemed to still linger on him. It was cold and nauseating. But this golden finger, a standard for transmigrators, gave him a sliver of confidence to survive in this fucked-up world and somewhat calmed his frantic heart. Now, he could finally look at this fucked-up world with a brand new pair of eyes. The bus had already driven out of the abandoned industrial zone. Now they were traveling on the only road back to the C-Ring zone, a dilapidated highway officially called Service Channel Number 7. On both sides of the highway were abandoned suburban areas. Skeletons of steel and concrete pierced the gray sky like the ribs of giant beasts. This was the area marked yellow on the map as the low-intensity contamination zone. Damn it, another jam. Li Fei, who was driving, suddenly cursed and slowly brought the bus to a stop. Guya looked ahead and saw several equally dilapidated commuter buses, bearing the logos of outsourcing companies, lined up on the road not far away. Further away, several soldiers in garrison troops' uniforms were setting up a cordon, seemingly dealing with some emergency. Probably some unlucky company's car broke down on the way back, attracting roadside stalls. Old Man Wang exhaled a smoke ring, his tone utterly unruffled. Roadside stalls? Guye asked instinctively. Just some F-class little trinkets wandering by the road, Li Fei explained, impatiently honking the horn. These places are too close to the wall and affected by the stability anchor field, so no big guys can be born here. But these scattered little things pop up every now and then. For the garrison troops, it's trouble. For us, sometimes it's extra cash. No sooner had he finished speaking than a gunshot and a brief shriek echoed from not far away. The stability anchor Li Fei mentioned was short for Reality Stability Anchor, a foundational technology first developed and promoted by the RSCP, full name, Reality Stability Containment Protocol Organization, abbreviated as RSCP, after the Great Fracture, which maintains the existence of human civilization. According to the official explanation in the Citizen Safety Handbook, distributed by the Human Federation during basic education, the catastrophe that ended the old world was essentially an unknown contamination that could distort physical laws. Regarding the source of this contamination, the RSCP named it the Source. This code name was also adopted by the Human Federation and written into textbooks. It represents the ultimate source of all currently known anomalous phenomena, i.e., bizarre entities to humanity. The function of the Reality Stability Anchor is to continuously release a special force field that repels the source's contamination by bombarding a rare, inert isotope. Within this force field, the structural strength of reality is greatly enhanced, thereby significantly inhibiting the natural generation of bizarre entities and weakening the anomalous characteristics of existing bizarre entities. However, the strength of this force field is not constant. It follows a strict energy decay law. The farther away from the stability anchor, which is the core of the force field, the weaker its strength, and the less effective its reinforcement of reality. This is also the fundamental reason why all walled cities are divided into 3 rings. The A ring district and B ring district are within the strong coverage of the force field. The reality structure is solid, and bizarre entities can hardly generate. The C ring zone, however, is located at the outermost edge of the force field's coverage. The reality structure here is relatively weak, although it is infinitely more stable than the contamination zones outside the wall. But it still cannot completely prevent some small-scale, low-level reality leakage phenomena, which are the insignificant F-class trinkets Li Fei spoke of. Soon, the cordon was removed. The convoy began to slowly move forward again. As they passed the scene, Guyi saw several garrison troop soldiers dragging the corpse of a monster, similar to a hyena but covered in rusted armor, onto a truck. Did you see that? Old man Wang flicked his cigarette ash. Probably some scavenger's contamination value exceeded the limit, and he didn't have money to buy black water, so he ended up turning into a beast right here. His tone was as flat as if he were saying, "The weather is nice today." Contamination value. This term immediately surfaced in Guya's mind. This was the sharpest guillotine hanging over the heads of all residents outside the wall. Once it exceeded the limit, a person was no longer a person. In this deathly silence and oppression, the commuter bus traveled for about another 10 minutes. Finally, at the end of the horizon, a black silhouette spanning heaven and earth appeared. That wall. That towering, high wall that divided the world into inside and outside. Guyi had seen it in the original owner's memories. But when he truly saw it, a feeling of being as insignificant as an ant rose from the bottom of his heart. The black alloy wall stretched upwards, disappearing into the lead gray clouds. Giant searchlights and menacing automatic turrets on the wall were like the emotionless eyes of gods looking down on the mortal world. Their bus was slowly driving towards that wall. As the vehicle entered the shadow of the high wall, the surrounding environment also began to get livelier. They had entered the C-ring zone. Although it was outside the wall, it was already the outermost edge of the Human Federation's protected area. Instantly, all the sounds of the world seemed to return at once. The hissing of steam, the high-pitched cries of street vendors, the sizzling of faulty neon lights, and the clamor of people talking. A mix of meat aroma, cheap alcohol, and industrial exhaust fumes assailed them. This was their world. A dangerous, chaotic, yet full of wild vitality world. Their bus did not stop on any street in the C-ring zone, but instead merged directly into the traffic, heading towards a fortress-like steel building at the foot of the high wall. On the wall of the building hung a somewhat faded sign, Changjiang, No. 2 Purification Station. People in the C-ring zone called this place the bathhouse. This was the only checkpoint all workers from outside the wall had to pass through to enter the B-ring district for their assignments. Their dilapidated bus joined a long queue of over a dozen trucks and vans, slowly inching forward. "Hey, old Wang, how was the haul today?" From a nearby truck bearing the Iron Fist Security logo, a one-eyed driver leaned out and shouted at Wang Shengguo. "Not bad. Picked up a complete contaminated blood. Can exchange it for 2 good bottles of wine later." Li Fei eagerly replied, his face full of boasts. "Damn, you guys are lucky. We ran into a tough one today, almost tore my car apart." The one-eyed man cursed, his eyes filled with envy. The queuing process was long and boring, but this mutual teasing and bragging between different companies diluted the fatigue of returning from their mission. Finally, it was their turn. The commuter bus was lifted by a huge mechanical arm and sent into a passage full of purification liquid nozzles. The interior of the bus was immediately filled with the strong smell of disinfectant. Immediately after, everyone got off and walked into a separate cubicle to receive ultraviolet radiation and purification liquid spray. Finally, the most crucial step, contamination value detection. Everyone lined up, passing one by one through a glowing archway detector. Li Fei was the first to walk through, and the indicator light on the archway turned yellow. Contamination value, 35%. A non-commissioned officer in garrison, troops logistics uniform, glanced at the data and lazily called out. Warning range passed. Next, Lin Zioki. Contamination value, 32%. Passed. When it was Guya's turn, he took a deep breath and walked through. He could feel that the cold, non-human energy from his transformation still lingered in his body. Contamination value, 28%. Passed. The non-commissioned officer didn't even lift an eyelid. Guya was stunned for a moment. He hadn't expected his value to be the lowest among everyone. Was it because his soul came from another world, or because of the bizarre compendium's protection? Before he could ponder further, it was Captain Wang Zhengguo's turn. When old Wang walked through, the yellow light on the archway was noticeably brighter than for others, even tinged with a dangerous orange. Contamination value, 48%. Warning, contamination value is close to the danger threshold. The non-commissioned officer finally looked up and frowned. Old Wang, your smoking is getting worse. If this continues, you'll have to visit the medical room for a chat. Get lost. Old man Wang cursed laughingly, pulling out a pack of mint cigarettes from his pocket and tossing them over. Try a different brand next time. The non-commissioned officer skillfully caught the cigarettes and waved his hand. All right, scram, next squad. Thus, all members of Squad 7 passed the inspection without incident. They reboarded the old but thoroughly cleaned commuter bus. In front of them, a huge tunnel gate leading inside the wall emitted a hum and slowly rose. The other end of the tunnel was the paradise that those outside the wall dreamed of. Chapter 5, 2 Worlds. The commuter vehicle drove into the deep tunnel. The tunnel was long, with dim yellow lights illuminating the walls at intervals. Light and shadow intersected on the car windows, as if traveling through a corridor of time. No one in the carriage spoke. Everyone subconsciously held their breath, because they knew that the other end of the tunnel was a completely different world. After about a minute of driving, a dazzling white light finally appeared ahead. The moment the front of the car completely rushed out of the tunnel, Guyi felt his eyes being sharply stung. Immediately after, an air distinctly different from that outside, the wall seeped in through the cracks in the car window. That air lacked the industrial exhaust and faint smell of decay characteristic of the C-ring zone. Instead, there was a slightly sweet and sour aroma, a scent of fermenting food. That was the smell wafting from the greenhouse arc of the Human Federation's Shenong Institute. This was the B-ring district, the world inside the wall. The commuter vehicle merged onto a wide, smooth asphalt road. Although the road surface still had some potholes and cracks, it was clearly regularly repaired. On both sides of the street were uniform residential buildings. Though the style was monotonous, every window was intact. There were even some green potted plants on the windowsills. Their vehicle, according to regulations, could only travel on the outermost service lane. But even so, the scenes of normal life still impacted their eyes, one after another. They saw children in uniform blue school uniforms, chasing a worn-out soccer ball on a playground with protective netting, laughing carefree with their school bags on their backs. A street vendor was scooping golden, fried synthetic potato cakes out of a frying pan, sprinkling them with spices. That dominant aroma seemed to penetrate their noses even through the car window. Gulp. In the carriage, someone swallowed, though it was unclear who. Several old workers in gray work clothes gathered around a stone table, playing chess and leisurely passing the time, as if all external dangers had nothing to do with them. Every time they saw these normal sights, it was a silent torment for everyone in Squad 7. It constantly reminded them that they were separated from this stability by only a wall. The atmosphere in the carriage became even more oppressive than when they were in the contamination zone. But strangely, Guyi only saw envy and unwillingness in their eyes, not hatred. He found the answer in the original owner's memories. Because the Human Federation, the organization they called the Patriarch, had already done its best. It was the Human Federation that built the high wall, blocking the strange tide that could devour everything. It was the Human Federation that, every week through the exchange office, freely distributed sedative, brand nutrient paste to all residents outside the wall, which could suppress contamination and ensure no one starved. It was the Human Federation that gave all children in the C-ring zone the right to free basic education, learning literacy, and the guide to anomalous survival. They couldn't make everyone live a good life, but they gave everyone a baseline to survive. It was precisely because they knew this, doing their best, that they felt even more helpless. The commuter vehicle finally turned into a secluded industrial park, almost close to the wall. This was the gathering place for outsourcing companies like Dust Purification Security. Unassuming, uniformly styled three-story gray buildings were the headquarters of these companies. Look, that building ahead with the Iron Fist logo is the territory of Iron Fist Security. Li Fei pointed out the window, pouting. That one-eyed guy who was bragging to us at the purification station is from their team. Guya looked in the direction he pointed and nodded. Are all these dozen or so companies in the entire park doing the same work as us? He asked. Of course. Li Fei sneered, a hint of self-mockery in his tone. To put it bluntly, no matter what company's name we operate under, we all work for one master. Our company doesn't have the ability to process the contamination samples and anomalous organisms we retrieve. They just act as middlemen, sorting and packaging the items, then reselling them at a high price to the RSCP liaison station in the B Ring district. The company gets the meat, it's good enough for us to get some soup. Guyi understood. It turned out that the end of their industry chain was the mysterious and cold RSCP. They were like the most insignificant scavengers at the very end of this giant war machine. So, don't look at how many companies there are, they're all the same. Our dust purification security is actually among the smallest and stingiest ones. Li Fei sighed and slowly pulled the car to a stop in front of a small building with peeling paint. This was their company. The handover process was cold and efficient. First step, parking and unloading. Auntie Liu Fang and Li Fei together carried the sample recovery box containing the contaminated blood protoplasts, as well as a dozen blood moss samples in sealed bags, to the materials department in the basement. They handed them over to a perpetually stern-faced storeroom manager, Old Sun. Old Sun didn't even look at them directly, just hastily swiped a few times on a data pad, then waved them away. Second step, mission report. Captain Wang Zhengguo went alone to the manager's office on the second floor. Gu Yi and the others could only wait quietly in the rest area downstairs, which didn't even have seats. This wait wasn't long. After about 10 minutes, Old Wang came down from upstairs, his face devoid of expression, but with a settlement statement in his hand. Old Wang took the statement to the finance office on the first floor. Soon, everyone's personal terminal received a transfer message. Gu Yi looked at the terminal interface in his hand. Mission settlement, 530 credit points. Details: basic attendance fee 100, F-grade site rating bonus 250, recovered item commission F-grade complete, 150, new recruit regularization bonus 30. Holy crap! Li Fei was the first to exclaim when he saw the bill, his face full of pleasant surprise. Fatty Ma was actually so generous this time. He really settled the commission for that broken jelly according to the company's standards. He knows what's good for him. Old Wang's lips also curved upwards, a rare sight. This rare smooth operation lifted everyone's spirits. Although it was still rated the lowest F grade, with the generous commission for recovered items, the income from this mission far exceeded expectations. At the logistics department, they collected the quantitatively rationed purification liquid and isolation patches needed for the next mission with their receipts, then left the gray building. On the way back, the atmosphere in the carriage, having shed its previous gloom, became much lighter. Buzz. The commuter vehicle once again passed through the tunnel gate, which seemed to connect two worlds, and returned outside the wall. When the familiar air of the C-ring zone, mixed with industrial exhaust and the smell of inferior fuel, once again rushed into the carriage, everyone's bodies seemed to completely relax. A cold drizzle had started at some point. The gray rain shrouded the entire gray millstone in an even more oppressive, damp, and cold atmosphere. The neon lights diffused into blurry patches of light on the wet ground. Li Fei rolled down the window, and cold raindrops hit his face, but he let out a hearty shout. Although it was dangerous here, although it was chaotic. But this was their world. On both sides of the road were the relatively clean official buildings on the edge of the East District and some camps belonging to the garrison troops. Occasionally, teams of heavily armed soldiers could be seen passing by their vehicle. The car continued to drive, the road conditions worsened, and the air began to smell increasingly mixed. They passed through the peripheral area of the South District. This was the most bustling and chaotic heart of the entire Sea Ring zone. The commuter vehicle had to slow down here, slowly navigating through the congested traffic and crowds. Finally, the commuter vehicle stopped in front of a U-shaped tenement building deep down a street called Rust Bone Street. The Hive Apartments. "Hey, wake up! We're home." Wang Zhenguo roared, "Don't just stand there." He turned around from the driver's seat, looking at everyone, a rare smile on his face. Today's earnings are good, and Ai has also been regularized double happiness. My treat, no more old man's barbecue. That old guy always skimps on portions. We're going to Clockwork Orange, drink the strongest Blackwater, and order a goddamn plate of the most expensive, crispy fried deep-sea protein tendrils. We're not going home until we're drunk. Oh ho to Clockwork Orange, long live the boss. Li Fei and Lin Xiaoqi jumped up from their seats, all their fatigue vanishing. Going to that place wasn't cheap. It seemed old Wang was truly happy this time. Chen Hao and Auntie Liu Fang also showed renewed smiles of anticipation. The car door creaked open. Gu Yi followed everyone out of the car, looking up at the Hive apartment building, which loomed like a coiled beast in the night. He took a deep breath. From the original owner's memories, he knew that he was home now. Home to a bizarre, yet incredibly real new home. Chapter 6, Clockwork Orange Wine. The Hive apartment building is located on Rust Bone Street. This is the territory of the One-Eyed Merchant Guild. The boss of the One-Eyed Merchant Guild is not a single person. Behind him is a guild composed of all the respectable merchants, information brokers, and high-level hunters in the South District. Together, they establish and maintain the iron laws of Rust Bone Street. Iron Law 1, unauthorized acts of violence are prohibited within the district. You can drink, trade, and brag inside, but if you dare to draw a gun on the street, the one-eyed boss and his ruthless subordinates will definitely chop you up and throw you to the butcher gang for recycling. Here, unless your fists are harder than the rules, you'd better be obedient. It's the last bit of order in this chaotic South District. Wang Zhenguo was in a genuinely good mood today, leading a group of younger individuals swaggering towards Clockwork Orange Tavern. Gu Yi, in the middle of the group, finally had a chance to observe this street, which was his nominal home street. There were no proper shops on either side of the road. All the stores had grown wildly from the bottom layers of the Steel Hive City. They passed an alley that reeked of strong engine oil. Deep in the alley, a shirtless man was using a sizzling mechanical arm to replace parts on a rifle. In Guya's mind, the name of this alley naturally surfaced, Mechanics Alley. Half of all the black market guns and parts in the entire Sea Ring zone flowed out from here. Chen Hao's glasses clearly glanced in that direction. Turning another corner, a strange smell, a mix of herbs and chemical reagents, assailed their noses. A neon sign hung at the entrance, depicting a syringe constantly dripping blood. Dr. Syringe's Clinic. Guyi retrieved information about this place from the original owner's memory. A guy with superb medical skills but corrupt medical ethics. He could pull you back from the brink of death, but he could also remove your kidney for money and sell it to the butcher gang. Lin Xiaoqi wrinkled her nose, clearly disliking the smell there. Just then, they passed an even darker, wider alley entrance. A strong smell of blood and decay, almost enough to make one faint, wafted from deep within that alley. On the road surface at the alley entrance, one could even see some long-dried and blackened bloodstains. Auntie Liu Fang subconsciously pulled Lin Xiaoqi closer to the other side of the street. "Tisk, those damn butcher gang bastards, pouring blood on the street again," she muttered under her breath. Gu Yi also subconsciously held his breath. This was the entrance to the no-man's land, slaughterhouse back alley. It was the kingdom of the butcher gang. As for what exactly was being slaughtered in there, no one knew. Everyone knew that if you wanted to eat something other than the tasteless nutrient paste provided by the Human Federation, then the piece of meat on your plate definitely came from that alley. From the cheapest, grayish-white protein blocks that even scavengers disdained, to the meat scraps that careful housewives like Auntie Liu Fang loved to buy for stewing. And then to the blood-red, premium protein ribs that only successful hunters in the One-Eyed Tavern could afford, reportedly tasting most like real meat. Everything came from the butcher gang. They monopolized almost all culinary desires in the entire Sea Ring zone. As for the source of that meat, no one dared to ask, and no one cared. As long as it was edible and didn't kill people, it was fine. They continued to walk forward. Guyi could even see, further in the distance, the more alluring neon lights of the casino district, painting half the night sky a decadent pink. He could also faintly hear the clamor of desire and madness emanating from that direction. With every step, Guyi felt like he was traversing the belly of a chaotic behemoth. Finally, they stopped in front of a metal door with a clockwork orange eye sign. Clockwork Orange Tavern. Pushing open the door, a wave of heat, mixed with strong liquor, tobacco, sweat, and cheap perfume, along with deafening heavy metal music, assailed them. The tavern was packed with workers just off shift, murderous bounty hunters, and some scantily clad women. Well, Old Man Wang struck it rich today, bringing so many youngsters to patronize. Behind the bar, a curvaceous woman, smoking a slender lady's cigarette, lazily lifted her eyelids. She was the owner here, a woman whose real name no one knew. Everyone called her Sister Orange. Enough nonsense. Old Man Wang found a booth and made everyone sit down. Bring me a serving of your most expensive, crispy fried deep-sea protein tendrils, and a bottle of black water for everyone. Bring it up first. All right, Sister Orange smiled and winked at the bartender behind the bar. Soon, 6 bottles of Blackwater liquor with coarse bubbles and a large platter of golden crisp, slightly twitching octopus tentacle-like things were served. Come on, don't be shy today. Old Man Wang was the first to raise his bottle. First gulp, to our escape from death. Second gulp, to Aya's promotion. Third gulp, damn it, to this rotten gray millstone. May we leave this cursed place soon. Cheers. Li Fei was the first to roar along, tilting his head back and taking a big gulp. Guyi also imitated them, raising the bottle of liquor called Blackwater and taking a large gulp. Instantly, an indescribable liquid, a mixture of the pungent taste of industrial alcohol, the metallic taste of groundwater, and the bitterness of some kind of moss, burned like fire from his throat all the way to his stomach. Cough, cough, cough. He choked, tears streaming from his eyes, feeling like he wasn't drinking liquor, but gasoline with sugar added. But strangely, after the burning sensation, a warm current slowly began to spread from his stomach to his limbs. The fatigue from the mission and the mental tension were indeed significantly diluted by this warm current. Detecting moderate purified substance intake by host, contamination value reduced by 0.1%. The codex's notification made Guya pause. So this stuff really could reduce contamination. Haha, look at you, you coward. Li Fei laughed, slapping the table. Guya recovered and looked at the platter of crispy fried deep-sea protein tendrils on the table. The tentacles were fried until their skin was golden brown, sprinkled with a layer of red, unknown spice powder. The most bizarre thing was that the ends of some tentacles were still twitching very slightly, nervously. He watched Lin Zioki gnaw on one like a chicken leg, chewing it with a satisfying crunch, her cheeks puffed out, and finally he mustered up the courage to pick one up, imitating her. He took a bite. Unexpectedly, it was delicious. The skin was crispy, but the meat inside was exceptionally springy and chewy, a bit like top-grade squid, but with a unique, slightly sweet taste similar to crab. Paired with the spicy seasoning and the burning sensation of Blackwater, it was an absolute perfect match. Gray Millstone? He asked casually while eating. Ha, you kid, after all this time, you still don't know our nickname here. Li Fei said, munching on an octopus tentacle, his words muffled. Look at that wall, it's dull gray. Our city is a giant, round millstone. The A ring district is the axis, the B ring district is the inner disk, and our C ring zone is the outermost ring, the grit that gets crushed and ground. His words carried a cynical self-mockery characteristic of C ring zone delinquents. The official name isn't that. Chen Hao, who had been silent, suddenly pushed his glasses and spoke. His voice was low and a little hoarse. This place, its designation is Safety Zone Number 13, officially named Wangchuan City. Wangchuan, gazing at that long dry river of oblivion. He chuckled self-deprecatingly and took another gulp of liquor. It sounds quite poetic. This was the first time Yi had heard the city's name. A Wangchuan city full of hope in official parlance. But in their own mouths, a damned and real gray millstone. Who cares what it's called, it's a cage either way. Auntie Liu Fang also took a rare sip of liquor, her face flushed. My daughter wrote to me last time, saying her dorm at the technical college in the B-Ring district is even bigger than our hive, single rooms. Sigh, as long as she's well, I'm willing to rot in this millstone my whole life. As she spoke, her eyes reddened again. For a moment, the atmosphere grew a little heavy. Oh, come on, why talk about such things? Lin Zyaoki noticed something was off, immediately stood up, pulled a few credit points from her pocket, and ran to the holographic jukebox in the corner of the tavern. Captain's treating today, so I'm treating everyone to a song. She operated it skillfully, and soon the deafening heavy metal music in the tavern stopped. It was replaced by a gentle folk song with a strong old-era feel. A clear female voice sang of long-gone sunshine, beaches, and love. The entire tavern's clamor seemed to be soothed somewhat by this song. Our little sparrow really knows how to handle things. Old Man Wang laughed heartily, raising his bottle. Come on, drink up, eat up. Li Fei also got excited, whistling at Lin Zyaoki and shouting, Zyaoqi, you're awesome. Lin Zyaoki made a face at him and ran back to her seat. Amidst the music, everyone relaxed. They drank heavily and bragged loudly. Li Fei recounted his glorious exploits of single-handedly fighting a man-faced dog in the ruins of the North District Cemetery, though everyone knew he was exaggerating. Auntie Liu Fang, meanwhile, began to haggle with Sister Orange, asking if she could get a discount on the platter of octopus tentacles. Gu Yi, while gnawing on the increasingly flavorful octopus tentacles and drinking the throat-burning Blackwater, listened to the gentle old-era song and his teammates' meaningless banter. He looked at everything before him with only the simplest thought. Damn it, this liquor is really bad. This meat is pretty good though. This world doesn't seem that hard to get by in. At least he was still alive today. Chapter 7, A Room and Two Lives. After saying goodbye to his teammates at the stairwell entrance, Gu Yi walked alone towards the even narrower iron staircase leading to the top floor. There was no elevator in the building. The old sound-activated lights required him to stomp his foot to awaken them one by one. The dim yellow glow could only illuminate a small area at his feet, while more darkness, like viscous oil, clung to the walls and ceiling. Old Man Wang's shouts, Li Fei's laughter, and Zyaoqi's crisp, see you tomorrow, Ji gradually faded behind him, swallowed by the walls of this old hive. By the time he climbed to the top floor and opened the door to his dormitory, the world had become completely silent. This was an added structure on the top floor, a cramped space built with thin sheet metal and composite boards, like a steamer in summer and an ice cellar in winter. The room was so small that Gu Yi felt it was more like a standing coffin. A single metal frame bed, a creaky wooden table, and a chipped chair were all his possessions. The only electrical appliance was the solitary energy-saving light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Even with such basic amenities, the rent was 500 credit points per month. Gu Yi closed the door behind him, not turning on the light immediately. He leaned against the cold iron door, listening to his somewhat hurried breathing, slowly calming down in the darkness, until his heart, which had been pounding from the battle and the time travel, returned to a normal rhythm. Then he reached out and with a click, locked the door with 2 turns. This action was like a ritual to completely isolate all the noise, danger, and prying from the outside world. Now he was alone here. He finally had time to face himself. Gu Yi fumbled his way to the bed and sat down heavily. The bed frame groaned under the weight. Everything he had experienced during the day, the bloody scenes, the bizarre compendium's slimy touch, and the exhaustion of surviving, all surged over him like a tide at this moment. He lay back, placing his arm over his eyes, trying to clear his mind. But the more he tried to empty his mind, the clearer another memory, not his own, emerged. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life playing in his head. The protagonist was the original owner of this body, an orphan also named Gu Yi, only 19 years old. The first memory fragment was damp. It was the Human Federation Hope Orphanage, located on the edge of the southern part of C-Ring Zone. Although dilapidated, it was relatively clean. Staff in plain uniforms patiently distributed free, calm, brand nutrient paste to a group of pale, emaciated children. Here, Gu Yi was just an orphan without a surname. He named himself Gu Yi, thinking that if he became a bizarre compendium, perhaps he wouldn't have to live in fear of starvation. Like the other children, his most important tasks each day were to study the Bizarre Survival Handbook, and pray that he wouldn't be taken away by the suddenly appearing garrison troops due to excessive contamination value. He had never seen what the world was like before the Great Fracture. That world, to him, was like a distant, unreal, mythical story from his teachers' mouths. The second memory fragment was filled with despair and longing. That was when he was 15. He graduated from the basic education school in C Ring Zone. Then, he was thrown into the giant meat grinder of C Ring Zone. He worked as an apprentice in those unmarked black factories. He breathed in choking metal dust for 16 hours a day. In return, he received a meager salary, barely enough to pay the rent for the coffin room on the top floor of the hive. He survived on the free nutrient paste distributed weekly by the Human Federation. But that was all. All his money went to secure a roof over his head. Not a single extra credit point to buy a bottle of nerve-numbing, black water, or a potato pancake that tasted of oil. Several times, he was almost thrown out by the hive manager like trash because he couldn't pay the rent. It was also at that time that a wild seed was planted in his heart. He had to get inside the wall. At all costs, he had to become a respectable person in B Ring District. The third memory fragment was the turning point in his life. A month ago, it was the day the security company from inside the wall came to see Ring Zone to recruit workers. This job was the only stepping stone he could see at the time to legally cross the border. He fought with all his might among hundreds of other young people like him, passing the rigorous physical and psychological tests. He was selected by Jingchen Security, and the person in charge of the final interview was Wang Zhengguo. He remembered old man Wang didn't ask much. He just squeezed his arm, looked at his eyes, which glowed green with hunger and longing, and then handed him an internship contract. He signed his name without hesitation at the time. And so, he became an intern in Squad 7. These memories were originally just archives belonging to another person. But now, as Guye personally experienced today's life and death struggle, as he drank that awful black water and ate that scalding protein filament, these memory fragments belonging to the past began to have a strange chemical reaction with his present, personal experiences. They were no longer someone else's story. They began to grow roots, embedding themselves deep into Guye's soul. He learned about this cramped dormitory he was in, this chaotic Rust Bone Street, this safe zone known as B7. However, just as Guye thought he had seen the original owner's short life, he suddenly realized a fatal contradiction. Why? Why was his consciousness so blurry at the beginning of today's mission? Like recovering from a serious illness, or rather, just waking up from a nightmare, the original owner's memory of how he arrived at the mission warehouse was completely blank. With this question, Guye began to actively delve deeper into the memory fragments in his mind that had been deliberately ignored. The scene began with a conversation. The time was late at night a few days ago. The location was a corner filled with discarded wine bottles downstairs in the Hive apartment building. The original owner, Guye, finally mustered the courage to find Wang Zhengguo, who was drinking alone, and asked the question he had kept in his heart the longest. "Captain Wang, if I work hard and become a full-time employee, will I one day be able to get a citizen ID for B Ring District?" In the scene, Old Man Wang was silent for a long time, just continuously pouring black water into his mouth. Finally, he told him the cruel truth with a hint of reluctance in his tone. "Kid, stop dreaming. Our kind of outside-the-wall contract, from outsourcing companies and citizen ID, are two lines that will never intersect. We never had the right to sit at that table from the beginning." Old Man Wang's words were like a cold iron hammer, brutally shattering the original owner's only dream. And so, in despair, he completely broke down. The memory scene jumped to late last night. The location was in this cramped dormitory. The scene shook violently, accompanied by the original owner's extremely suppressed, heavy gasps like a bellows. On the table, there was a half-burned candle emitting a strange, sweet scent. And in the candle's glow, the original owner was using a rusty small knife, trembling as he carved a bizarre, incomprehensible symbol into his chest. It was not any known text or pattern. It was more like a pupil. A blasphemous pupil that defied spatial logic, as if to turn his chest into a keyhole that could peer into something. No blood flowed out. The wound was like a greedy mouth, drinking every last drop of the blood that was about to flow out. Why 3 I and 3? The original owner's tearful, off-key, anciently malicious, and insane syllables, seemingly impossible for human vocal cords to produce, echoed in Guya's mind. This memory showed that the original owner, seeing no hope of entering B Ring District, had a complete mental breakdown. He bought a set of evil rituals from a mysterious merchant on Rust Bone Street known as the Guide. The merchant told him that by activating this wish rune with will and blood, he could transmit his deepest obsession to an unseen existence, thereby gaining the power to fulfill his wish. The price was merely a little pain and intense longing. Now he was performing the final step of the ritual. He lit the candle, which was mixed with unknown bizarre compendium powder, and pushed his spirit to its limit with pain and blood. Ah. With his final roar, the rune on his chest suddenly lit up with a faint blue light. At the same time, an indescribable surge of information from a higher dimension, using that rune as a coordinate, violently poured into the original owner's mind. It wasn't an energy impact. It was pure information contamination, beyond the limits of human comprehension. The original owner's scream couldn't even be fully uttered before it turned into a short, choked grunt. His eyes instantly lost all their luster, pupils dilated, staring blankly at the ceiling. And at that very moment, Guyi, this wandering soul from another world, was randomly snatched through the rift torn open by that ritual and stuffed into this freshly crashed, warm body. Then the memory abruptly stopped here. Immediately following, the second, even more chilling memory played. It was a memory without thought. It was like watching a first-person movie. He saw. His body, after its soul died, did not fall. Instead, like a wound-up puppet, it sat upright on the bed all night. Day broke. Beep, beep, beep. The alarm clock by the bed rang. His body mechanically raised a hand and turned off the alarm, then got up, dressed, and washed. All movements were precise but stiff, like a robot programmed to perform tasks. He saw himself walk out of the dormitory. In the common lounge, he encountered Li Fei, who was eating breakfast. "Damn it, Ai, didn't you sleep well last night? You look like a zombie." In the memory, Li Fei's voice was distant, as if through a thick pane of glass, but he didn't answer. He just nodded expressionlessly. Then, he followed Old Man Wang onto the dilapidated commuter vehicle. Along the way, no matter how Li Fei and Lin Zai-oki joked, he just silently stared out the window. That body was on autopilot, a living corpse, its soul hollowed out, until they entered that abandoned basement. Until Gu Yi's body came into contact with the blood moss on the wall, which emitted a faint, bizarre compendium energy. That real contamination from the outside world, like an electric current, violently struck his walking corpse, and finally completely activated him, this new soul, trapped in the cockpit, observing for an entire morning. And so, he truly, genuinely woke up. Guyi suddenly sprang up from the bed, gasping for air, his forehead covered in cold sweat. He reached up and touched his neck. The phantom pain of suffocation from the memory still lingered there. He lifted his shirt and looked at his chest, but saw no wound. The original owner died. Last night in this very room, on this very bed where he was now sitting. So what was he now? A wandering soul who happened to pass by, stuffed into this empty body. Then sleepwalked for half a day before adapting to this body. Was that so-called bizarre compendium related to the wish rune carved by the original owner? Did it kill the original owner and then chose me, or rather parasitize me? Who exactly was that mysterious guide? Why was he selling such dangerous things? What was his purpose? After a long while, he got up from the bed, walked to the table, and reached out to press the switch for the energy-saving light. Click. Blinding, yet incredibly real light instantly filled the entire room. He saw on the table a frayed copy of the Preliminary Identification Handbook of Bizarre Materials left by the original owner. He saw the pair of faded work boots in the corner, which he would have to wear again tomorrow. Gu Yi looked down at his hands. These hands were his hands. This bed was his bed. But this life was inherited by him from a dead man, along with that fatal secret. Chapter 8, The Mysterious Guide to the Golden Finger. I will use your identity, and this power that does not belong to me, to live well. The promise seemed somewhat hollow in the empty room. Guyi knew very well that talk was cheap. He had to understand the only trump card in his hand. He closed his eyes and examined his golden finger in his mind, the bizarre compendium. A book made of faint, smoke-like black mist appeared directly in his mind. It was like software directly installed in his brain. He opened the codex. On the title page of the codex, 4 large bookmarks emitting different lights appeared. The first, named Record of 100 Ghosts, emitted an ominous blood-red light. The second, named Cabinet of Marvels, emitted a mysterious dark purple light. The third, named Scroll of True Words, emitted a deep abyssal black light. The fourth, named Curse of the Plague Heart, emitted a faint green light like decaying phosphorescence. Currently, only the bookmark for the Record of 100 Ghosts was lit. The latter 3 were gray, seemingly requiring specific conditions to unlock. Guya's consciousness focused on the lit record of 100 ghosts. The page automatically turned, revealing the first page to him. It was an incredibly detailed, even living card. The background of the card was a dark, damp ventilation duct. In the center of the image, a pool of dark red, seemingly living contaminated blood was slowly wriggling, with bubbles of varying sizes rising to its surface. And below the card were lines of clear text, like system data. Transformation card, No 001. Name, Contaminated Blood. Grade, F. Type, Entity/Living. Description, a puddle of sludge with a mind of its own. Don't let it touch you, or it will seep into your pores and turn you into the same rotten thing, inside out. Abilities. 1 form transformation. Can transform the body into formless, contaminated sludge, immune to physical impact, and can enter narrow crevices. 2 corrosive mucus. Secretes weakly corrosive mucus from within the body, which can be used for attack or to delay enemies. Weaknesses. 1. High temperature. Temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Celsius can cause it to evaporate quickly. 2. Purification concept. Reacts violently to RSCP's purification liquid and purification bullets. 3. Dry environment. Extremely dry environments will significantly reduce its activity. Transformation card? Guya's consciousness focused on this unfamiliar term. The codex's information stream immediately provided an explanation. Transformation card, generated after containing an entity living bazaar. The host can consume mental power to transform themselves into the form of that bazaar. Current highest grade that can be contained, E grade. Transformation. Guya instantly understood. This record of 100 ghosts was his transformation list. He continued to turn the page backward. The rest of the record of 100 ghosts was indeed blank. He withdrew his consciousness to the title page and tried to touch the 2 gray bookmarks. Cabinet of Marvels, unlocked, automatically unlocks after containing the first armament card. Scroll of True Words, unlocked, automatically unlocks after containing the first law card. Curse of the Plague Heart, unlocked, automatically unlocks after containing the first meme card. Armament card, law card, meme card. Guya frowned. Although he still didn't understand exactly what they were, he vaguely felt that the gameplay of his golden finger was far more complex and powerful than he had imagined. After calming down, Guya's consciousness returned to the main interface of the codex. This time, he began to study the upgrade method of the codex itself and some additional functions. Soon, he found a progress bar locked by a chain icon and several equally dim functional areas on the last page of the codex. Codex level, LV. Upgrade condition, contain and analyze 10 different bazaars. Current progress, 110. Below the progress bar, only one functional area was lit. Fusion and evolution, LV1. Guya's thoughts lingered on this function, which sounded the most impressive. A piece of explanatory text popped up. Fusion and evolution, LV1, can fuse 2 cards of the same type with a certain chance to create a brand new, higher grade card. Currently available fusion type, transformation card only. Basic cost, each time the fusion program is activated, 20% of maximum mental power is consumed. Hint, fusion requires reference to adaptability. The higher the adaptability of 2 species, the higher the success rate, the lower the additional mental power consumed. Warning, if fusion fails, the 2 cards used as materials will enter a depletion state for 24 hours, during which they cannot be used. Guya read all the instructions, word by word. This is such a scam. After reading the long string of instructions, Guya couldn't help but complain in his heart. This fusion function was far more expensive than he had imagined. First, activating it required 20% of his mental power, and it was a precious percentage deduction, which was almost 1/3 of his combat endurance. High risk, high reward, huh? Guyi rubbed his chin, his eyes gradually lighting up. Although there were many restrictions, but the temptation of creating a brand new, higher-grade card, it was simply too great. This function was practically a game-changing artifact tailor-made for someone like him, starting from scratch. Throw in 2 F-grade pieces of junk. If he was lucky, an E-grade or even D-grade, treasure could emerge. This was the true shortcut to breaking through class barriers and reaching the top in one step. Gambling addict's delight. Guyi's lips uncontrollably curled upwards. He suppressed the urge to rush out immediately and catch another bazaar for a synthesis experiment. He knew that he currently only had the contaminated blood card, so he couldn't play around. He needed more materials. After researching these, Guyi discovered another problem. Apart from transforming, he seemed to have no abilities he could use in human form. This meant that if an emergency occurred, he wouldn't even have the most basic self-preservation and counterattack abilities. Is there no other way? He carefully reread the Codex's instructions. Finally, in the corner of the Record of 100 Ghosts page, he found a line of extremely small, almost overlooked gray text. Skill extraction unlocked. Unlocks when Codex level reaches LV2. Description: once unlocked, you can select skills daily from contained, transformation cards or armament cards and equip them to the host. After equipping, the host can use the skill in human form. So it's here. Guyi suddenly understood. It wasn't that there weren't any, it was that his level wasn't high enough, and they hadn't unlocked yet. As long as the Codex reached level 2, he would have a trump card for combat in human form, and the condition for upgrading was to contain more different types of bazaars. The path to becoming stronger was now laid out clearly before him. That was: contain like crazy. Contain all observable different types of bazaars to unlock the Cabinet of Marvels and the Scroll of True Words, to raise the Codex's level, to obtain more materials for fusion and evolution. Hugh. Guyi let out a long breath. He opened his eyes again, looking at the night sky outside the window, grotesquely colored by neon lights. His eyes held less confusion and fear. He set 2 goals for himself first. First, and most importantly, survive and become stronger. Contain like crazy. Contain all observable different types of bazaars to unlock the Cabinet of Marvels and the Scroll of True Words, to raise the Codex's level, to obtain more materials for fusion and evolution. Only by possessing enough power to protect himself could he gain a foothold in this damned world. Second, uncover the truth behind the original owner's death. Figure out the reason for his transmigration, and figure out what the hell this bizarre compendium, imprinted deep in his soul, actually was, and to unravel this mystery. The mysterious guide who sold the original owner the wishing ritual was his only clue at the moment. Chapter 9 credits and the vanishing guides. The next day, Guyi was woken up by the ceaseless noise of the Hive apartment building. The sound of arguments downstairs, the crying of mischievous children, and the retching of a drunkard in the hallway. All the sounds mixed together like a pot of boiling, sour-smelling porridge of life. He opened his eyes and stared at the familiar, ugly crack on the ceiling, momentarily dazed. Everything from yesterday felt like a bizarre dream. But when he opened his personal terminal and saw the clear number 1050 in his account balance, he knew it was all real. Guyi didn't linger in bed. In this world, survival came first. He first took his ID card and went to the Human Federation Resource Exchange at the edge of the South District. It was an official institution, smelling of disinfectant like an old-world bank. The air was filled with numbness and silence. Everyone stood in long queues, waiting to receive their weekly relief rations that ensured they wouldn't starve. ID. Inside the window, a staff member in a garrison troop's logistics uniform didn't even look up. Guyi handed him the card. The person swiped it on a machine, then, like throwing trash, tossed out 7 toothpaste tube-sized, dark green Calm brand nutrient pastes from the window. Next. Guyi stuffed the nutrient pastes into his backpack, turned and left the oppressive place, plunging into the bustling, lively market of Rustbone Street. This was where life truly began. With an extra 530 credit points, Guyi felt his back straighten considerably. He no longer walked with his head down, hurrying along, as he did in the original owner's memories. He began to look up, observe, and experience. First, he spent 100 credit points at a stall with a gas mask sign, buying a brand new respirator with a double-layer activated carbon filter. The old one should have been replaced long ago. Wearing the new mask, the faint, lingering smell of rot in the air was indeed much less noticeable. Then, he was immediately drawn by a strong, oily aroma. What a smart mask. Guye mentally gave it a thumbs up. It was a small stall selling fried synthetic potato pancakes. The vendor was a one-armed man, skillfully using one hand to toss gray-white potato mash patties into a bubbling pot of oil, the type of which was unknown. Sizzle. The potato pancakes quickly puffed up, turning golden and crispy. "Boss, one please," Guye said. 10 credit points. Guye paid and took the hot potato pancake wrapped in oiled paper. He mimicked the people next to him, sprinkling a layer of red, spicy seasoning powder on top. He took a bite. The crust was crispy, and the inside was piping hot and soft. Although it didn't taste much like potato, it offered more of a cheap satisfaction of mixed starch and oil. But this warm texture and the damn oily taste were a million times better than that cold nutrient paste. Guye quickly devoured the luxury item, worth 10 credit points, feeling his whole body's cells relax considerably. Fed and satisfied, it was time for business. Relying on the memories in the original owner's mind, he began to navigate the intricate, capillary-like alleys of Rust Bone Street. He was going to find the mysterious guide who sold him the wish rune. The route in his memory twisted and turned. The further he went, the darker the light and the fewer people there were. On the walls of the alleys, strange, incomprehensible symbols painted in various colors began to appear. The air was filled with a damp, moldy smell that seemed to never dissipate. This was the dark zone of Rust Bone Street. It was where illicit transactions took place. Finally, Guye stopped at the end of the deepest, narrowest alley. In his memory, the guide's stall was located here. It was a stall always shrouded in shadow, with a tattered cloth serving as its door curtain. The stall always displayed strange antiques, supposedly dug up from the cemetery in the North District. For example, a doll that cried on its own, or dice made from dead people's finger bones. It was here that the original owner spent a whole year's savings, a total of 1,500 credit points, to buy that deadly ritual. However, at this moment, before Guye, there was nothing. The stall from his memory was gone. Not just gone. There wasn't even a trace that anyone had ever set up a stall here. The walls were covered with the same dirty stains and moss as everywhere else. The ground was also littered with the same disgusting trash and puddles. It was as if there had never been any stall here. Guye's heart sank sharply. No, this was too wrong. Logically, a place where things are displayed year-round would leave a cleaner mark on the walls and ground due to obstruction, compared to the surroundings. But there was none here. He walked to a neighboring stall selling used electronic parts. The vendor was an old man as thin as a monkey. "Old man," Guye tried to make his voice sound casual. "Just wondering, did the antique seller next door not set up his stall today?" The old man slowly looked up, with his cloudy eyes as if covered with a layer of oil. He stared at Guye strangely, as if looking at a madman speaking nonsense. "Young man." He put down the circuit board in his hand and said in a very puzzled tone, "Did you get the wrong place? My stall has been here for almost a year. When have I ever had a neighbor next to me? This place." He pointed to the empty corner next to him. "Hasn't it always been a toilet for people to pee in?" After he finished speaking, he ignored Guye. He lowered his head again and continued tinkering with his parts, as if he had only encountered a random person asking for directions. Guye's heart completely chilled. Not only were the physical traces erased, even the memories of the surrounding people were altered along with it. If Guye hadn't inherited the original owner's memories, which were etched deep into his soul because of the ritual, he would probably even start to doubt himself, whether that guide had truly existed. Guye stood at the end of the empty alley, a chill rising from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. The original owner's death was likely not an accident. His transmigration here didn't just inherit a golden finger. He exited the unsettling alley and returned to the main thoroughfare of Rust Bone Street, which was full of the breath of living people. The surroundings were still noisy and full of vitality. But this time, Guye always felt that beneath this clamor, a pair of eyes were lurking in the darkness, observing. Chapter 10, The Value of the Black Market. Coming out of the alley where the guide had vanished, Guye's mood was heavy. That unseen threat was like a thorn in his heart. The lead on the guide was cut. Where should he go next? He remembered he still had the 3 purification bullets Captain Wang gave him, but no gun to fire them. And in this messed up world, guns were still very important. To be honest, he had never even touched a gun before transmigration, so now that he had the chance, shouldn't he at least go and see? I need to get a gun. This thought suddenly became incredibly clear in his mind. He relied on his memory and headed towards the black market gun trading area in Rustbone Street, South District, Wrench's territory. As soon as he turned into the alley, a strong smell of engine oil and burning metal wafted over him. On both sides of the alley, large and small shops were crammed together, and without exception, all of them had signs with wrenches and gears hanging at their entrances. The grating sound of grinding and the sizzling sound of welding were incessant. This place handled half of Rustbone Street's arms trade. Guya's goal was clear. He walked directly into the largest shop in the alley. This shop had no sign, only a wrench symbol welded from scrap parts hanging at the entrance. The shop was dim, and the walls were covered with disassembled gun parts and various mechanical prosthetics he couldn't name. A burly, shirtless man, covered in grease and burn scars, stood with his back to the door, using a mechanical arm that sparked with electricity to replace the barrel of an exaggeratedly large, heavy machine gun. He was Wrench, the de facto ruler of this alley. "What are you looking at? What do you want to buy?" Wrench didn't turn around, his voice sounding like it came from a broken metal speaker, muffled and hard. "I want to buy a pistol," Guya said. "Newbie." "Yes." Wrench stopped his work and finally turned around. On his smoke-stained face, one eye was a glowing red mechanical prosthetic. He sized Guyi up and down. "Guns are forbidden in B Ring District. Although no one manages C Ring Zone, if the garrison troops catches you, they'll confiscate it all the same. Have you thought it through?" "I have," Guya nodded. "All right." Wrench walked to the corner, rummaged through a greasy iron box, and pulled out 3 pistols of various designs, throwing them onto the table. "See for yourself." Guya picked up the first one. It was an old-world police revolver, the barrel full of scratches, and the grip's rubber worn smooth. Rustbone Street's standard issue, the Gravedigger revolver, 6 rounds, sturdy, durable, doesn't jam easily. The downside is low power. Whether it hits anyone beyond 50 meters depends entirely on faith. Wrench was concise. "How much?" 3,000 credit points, no bargaining. Guya's heart sank halfway. 3,000? His entire fortune was just over 1,000. He picked up the second one. It was a semi-automatic pistol, pieced together from various parts with a very sci-fi design. Scavenger Custom Mod 15-round magazine. The advantage is fierce firepower and fast firing rate. The downside is the chance of it exploding is as high as the chance of it jamming. "What about this one?" 5,000. Guyi silently put down the second gun and picked up the last one. It was a single-shot flare gun, so simple in structure it looked like a toy. "The Junkie's last friend. It can fire purification bullets like slugs, hitting whatever you aim at within 30 meters. The downside is, after one shot, you have 3 seconds to ponder life." "This one should be cheaper, right?" Guya held onto a sliver of hope. Wrench's mechanical prosthetic eye flashed. 1,005. "Seeing as you're a new face, I'll give you a friendly price, 1,450. Yes. He completely gave up hope. With the little money he had now, he couldn't even afford the most basic self-defense weapon. "If you don't have money, get out. Don't waste my time." Wrench saw his embarrassment and waved his hand impatiently. Guyi silently exited the shop, filled with a sense of frustration. It seemed getting a gun would have to wait. He didn't leave immediately but walked into another, darker, and more foul-smelling alley. This was Rustbone Street's black market for bizarre materials. On the stalls lining both sides of the alley, various nauseating things were displayed. Tentacles with eyeballs floating in glass jars of formaldehyde, dried faces of human-faced dogs, hard as leather, and piles of black, rotting flesh, emitting faint energy fluctuations, scraped off unknown bizarre creatures. Guya suppressed his nausea and stopped in front of a stall. On the stall were several pieces of gelatinous solid, identical to the blood moss he had absorbed and consumed yesterday. "Boss, how much for this?" The stall owner, a man as thin as a bamboo pole, lazily lifted his eyelids. "Residual contaminated blood, 150 credit points per portion. They say if you soak it in black water back home, it can help you withstand a few more contaminations. Kid, you don't look so good, want a portion?" Guya said nothing. He quietly gave an instruction to the bizarre compendium in his mind. Scan, attempt containment. Scan successful. Individual, blood moss residue, inactive, unable to generate card. Weak homologous energy detected. Proceed with absorption. Guya said nothing. He really wanted to try if he could absorb the energy of this thing on the spot. But when he saw the stall owner's hand, hidden under the table and gripping a short-barreled shotgun, he immediately dismissed that dangerous idea. Are you kidding? Trying a trick in this kind of place, he'd probably be blown to bits before the codex even finished absorbing. No, I'll just look around. He asked at several other stalls, and the results were all similar. Most of the bizarre materials circulating in the black market were low-grade F-class materials, expensive and mostly useless. Occasionally there were E-class ones, but the price would soar to 4 digits, far beyond what he could imagine. Moreover, these diverse bizarre materials couldn't trigger the codex's strange containment conditions, making it impossible to unlock new entries. It seems relying on the black market to find bargains and get stronger is simply unrealistic. Guya sighed, completely giving up on the idea. Just as he was about to leave this nauseating alley, his gaze was drawn to a stall selling junk in the corner. The stall owner was a drowsy old man, and on his stall was only a rusty tin box. The box was filled with various scraps dug out from the ruins of the cemetery in the North District. Rusty nails, broken pottery shards, and some animal bones. Guya originally only glanced casually. But just as his gaze fell upon a pale white bone, only finger length, in the box, the cold, mechanical voice of the bizarre compendium sounded in his mind without warning. Special medium detected that meets containment conditions. Guya's breathing instantly stopped. He forcibly suppressed his wildly beating heart, pretending to casually rummage through the pile of junk. Name, unknown. Grade, F. Type, containment condition. Reshape, reconstruct the scattered bones into its approximate form before death. Guya's brain worked rapidly. Reconstruct, which meant he had to buy all these bone fragments. He pointed to the pile of junk in the box and said to the drowsy old man, "Grandpa, how much for this pile of bones?" The old man opened his eyes, glanced at him, his voice weak. "Not sold separately. If you want to buy, take the whole box." "How much?" Guya tried to make his voice sound casual. The old man held out 5 dark, dry fingers. 50 credit points. Not a cent less. Guya's heart swelled with joy. This price was practically a giveaway. He suppressed the excitement that was almost bursting out. His face still maintained a calm and composed expression, but his actions betrayed him. Deal. He replied almost instantly. He even skipped the most basic, haggling step essential for C-ring zone transactions. The old man, who had already been drowsy, suddenly had a flicker of shrewdness in his cloudy eyes. He snapped his eyes open. He didn't even bargain. Could it be? This pile of junk, which he himself considered trash, was some kind of treasure he had overlooked. The old man's guts instantly turned green with regret. He immediately wanted to go back on his word. He opened his mouth, just about to utter the classic phrase, "Wait a minute, I misremembered the price." But Guya's actions were 10,000 times faster than his. The moment the old man opened his mouth, drip. A crisp electronic notification sound, indicating the completion of the transaction, had already rung from Guya's personal terminal. Then, without waiting for the old man to react, he suddenly bent down and picked up the dirty, heavy, huge wooden box with one grab. Then, without looking back, he turned and left. "Hey, you kid, wait." The old man finally reacted. He sprang up from his recliner, reaching out to try and stop Guya. However, Guya, carrying the box that was almost half his height, burst out with unprecedented speed. In a few flashes, he squeezed into the crowded, noisy stream of people. In the blink of an eye, he vanished without a trace, leaving only the old man, standing alone, stunned in place, his hands still outstretched in a gesture of retention. Finally, he could only slap his thigh in annoyance and curse vehemently. "Oh, damn it. I misjudged." Guya, now carrying this box of junk, just wanted to return to his dorm immediately, close the door, and thoroughly research this unexpected find. However, just as he walked out of the alley and was about to return to the hive, a familiar voice called out to him from behind. "Holy crap, ah yeah." Guya turned around to see Li Fei looking at him with a surprised expression and at the box of junk in his arms. You got rich, huh? Not staying in the dorm, but coming here to pan for gold. Beside Li Fei was a tall woman in a black leather jacket, carrying a long, rectangular weapon. The woman had a stern face and eyes like knives. A mere glance from her sent a chill down Guya's spine. Oh, this is my sister, Razor, Li Fei casually introduced, then pointed at Guyi, my colleague Guye. Hello, Guya nodded somewhat stiffly. The woman named Razor merely gave a very slight nod in acknowledgement, considering it a greeting, and then stopped looking at him. I'm leaving now, she said coldly to Li Fei. All right, go on, Li Fei waved his hand impatiently. Razor said no more, turned, and merged into the crowded flow of Rust Bone Street, quickly disappearing. It wasn't until the suffocating sense of oppression completely vanished that Gu Yi finally breathed a sigh of relief. Don't mind her, she always has that sour face. Li Fei seemed relieved too, reverting to his boisterous self, and slung an arm around Gu Yi's shoulder. All right, stop hugging your pile of junk. Since you're already out, let's go. Bro will take you to a good place to broaden your horizons. Chapter 11, Old Papers of the Past. Half-dragged by Li Fei, Guya clutched the box of junk and followed him into another, even more secluded and quiet alley. The atmosphere here was completely different from Wrench's Street. There were no harsh grinding sounds, nor a strong smell of engine oil. The air was filled with the scent of dust and old paper, as if one had walked into an old house that hadn't been lived in for decades. The shops on both sides of the alley were even more dilapidated. There were no signs, no shouting. Most of the shopkeepers were elderly men and women, each looking as if they were about to fall asleep, lazily leaning back in their recliners, indifferent to passers-by. Hee, how is it? Li Fei lowered his voice, a mysterious, I'm showing you the world smile on his face. This is the really good place in our South District. The people of Rust Bone Street call this the pile of old papers. They sell old-era stuff dug out from the ruins of the cemetery in the North District. Guyu was a little curious. He followed Li Fei into the darkest little shop, almost swallowed by clutter. The shopkeeper was an old man with reading glasses as thin as a dry stick, painstakingly flipping through a paper book with a ruined cover under the dim light of an energy-saving lamp. He didn't even lift an eyelid to look at them. Guya's gaze was immediately drawn to the strange goods in the shop. The items here had no practical value. But they all came from the legendary Golden Age, before what was called the Great Fracture. In a corner, Guya saw an old-era home gaming console, covered in scratches with worn controller cables. Beside it were scattered a few palm-sized plastic boxes called cartridges. In the original owner's memory, these things only appeared as one or two blurry images in history textbooks. On another shelf were stacks of comic books, carefully wrapped in plastic film, their pages already yellowed. The covers depicted flying men and women in tight suits, striking various exaggerated poses. There were also some even stranger things. A ceramic doll with a missing arm, its face bearing two eerie tear stains. A rusty, square tin biscuit box, with a chubby foreign old man in a red dress painted on it. Guya felt like he had walked into a small history museum made of trash. These items seemed so out of place in this struggling, gray millstone. They couldn't be eaten, couldn't be drunk, and certainly couldn't be used as weapons. Their only value was to remind people. This world once was not like this. Boss, do you still have that thing here? Li Fei walked to the counter with familiarity and knocked on the table. The old man finally looked up, adjusted his reading glasses, and slowly said, "What's the rush, you monkey? Every time you come, it's like you're chasing death." He complained as he reluctantly pulled a heavy, velvet-wrapped box from under the counter. The box opened, revealing a yellow, palm-sized plastic square lying quietly inside. It had two small holes for headphones and a row of tiny, worn buttons whose text was no longer legible. A Sony Walkman, an ancient music player long since completely phased out by time. Li Fei's eyes instantly lit up. He carefully held the item as if cradling a priceless treasure. Good condition, old man. Does it still work? Nonsense. The old man snorted disdainfully. I personally cleaned it up, even replaced the battery with a new one for you. Here, I'll even give you a cassette, old world rock and roll, it's powerful. he said, tossing over an equally old cassette. All right, I'll take this thing. Li Fei played with the Walkman in his hand, unable to put it down. Name your price. The old man held up 5 bony fingers. 800 credit points. Holy shit. Li Fei nearly dropped the item in his hand. Why don't you just rob me? 800 points. For this broken plastic box? Last time I came, you only sold it for 300. Last time was last time, this time is this time. The old man lowered his head to his book again and said slowly. This thing, in the entire pile of old papers, only I still have it. Buy it or don't. You. Li Fei glared, fuming. 800 credit points, this was almost all his savings, earned by risking his life on 3 missions. Gu Yi, watching from the side, secretly gasped. He hadn't expected that this electronic junk, which seemed worthless to him, could sell for such an exorbitant price here, comparable to half a gun. 350, not a single credit point more. Li Fei gritted his teeth, beginning to haggle. 680, 1 credit point less and you put it back. 380, old man, don't be too greedy. This thing might break any day. 650, this is art, kid. Art is priceless. Screw your art. Li Fei pretended to be angry, slammed the Walkman onto the table, and pulled Gu Yi, ready to leave. Let's go, Ai, we're not buying it. Let him keep it. They had only taken 2 steps. The old man's unhurried voice came from behind them. 500, that's the lowest price. Any less, and I'll dismantle it and sell the parts to Wrench. Li Fei stopped. He turned around and stared at the old man for 3 seconds. Finally, like a deflated ball, he grumbled and pulled out his personal terminal from his pocket. Damn it, you win. Payment successful, 500 credit points. Watching a large sum of money instantly vanish from his account, Li Fei's face was as wrinkled as a bitter gourd. He carefully tucked the expensive Walkman and cassette into the closest spot against his chest. Even after leaving the pile of old papers, Li Fei still looked so pained he was almost in tears. Gu Yi finally couldn't help but ask, holding the box of genuine trash that cost only 50 credit points. Brother Monkey, you spent so much money just to buy this thing. This thing. Li Fei immediately became displeased at the remark, stopping and glaring at him. What do you know? This is sentiment, this is romance, this is. He stammered for a long time without explaining himself. Finally, he scratched his head, his usual cynical expression suddenly turning a little embarrassed. He looked left and right, making sure no one was paying attention to them, then lowered his voice and said to Gu Yi. Next week, isn't next week almost here? What's almost here? Gu Yi was puzzled. Li Fei's face, surprisingly, turned a rare shade of red. Zio Chi's birthday, you kid, did you forget? He tucked the Walkman further into his embrace, his tone carrying a hint of the unique youthful awkwardness and boastfulness characteristic of his age. Doesn't she love the old songs from Clockwork Orange the most? I heard her say once how great it would be if there was something that could put music in her pocket, so she could listen anytime. So I just... He didn't finish, just chuckled foolishly. Gu Yi looked at him, stunned. He suddenly felt that the box of bones in his arms, which cost only 50 credit points and might contain a huge secret, at this moment, didn't seem as valuable as the yellow plastic box in Li Fei's arms, which cost 500 credit points and could only play music. Chapter 12, Skeleton Dog. After parting ways with Li Fei, Gu Yi, carrying that heavy box of junk, quickly returned to the hive. He plunged into his single dorm room on the top floor and locked the thin metal door behind him. The room still had that familiar smell of cheap disinfectant mixed with damp air. But at this moment, it became his only laboratory. He carefully placed the newly bought gas mask on the table, then eagerly dumped everything from the metal box onto the cold concrete floor with a clatter. A smell combining dust, mold, and some unknown fishy odor permeated the air. Before Gu Yi, a pile of true garbage appeared. Rusty nails, broken beer bottles, a few spent casings from unknown firearms, and a large number of scattered, pale white bone fragments covered in dried mud. These bones were his true objective. Gu Yi put on his spirit isolation gloves for the task, squatted down, and began his first, and most bizarre, crafts class. Containment condition: reshape, reassemble the scattered bones into their approximate form from when they were alive. It sounded simple. Doing it, he realized how messed up it was. These bones were too fragmented. The large ones were palm-sized rib fragments, the small ones were mere fingernail-sized remnants of phalanges. Moreover, all the bones were mixed together, making it impossible to tell which was which. Guye first tried to match the bones like a jigsaw puzzle, based on the breaks and gaps. He spent a full half-hour, sweating profusely, only managing to piece together a disjointed skeleton that looked like a front leg. And there were still several fragments left over that didn't fit at all. Damn it. He cursed it under his breath, irritably running a hand through his hair. No, at this rate, he wouldn't finish even by tomorrow morning. He simply abandoned that scientific method. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and focused all his attention on his hands. He no longer looked with his eyes, but with his heart, or rather, with the vague perception of abnormalities that the bizarre compendium granted him to feel each bone. He picked up a fragment of a rib, then picked up another. When the broken edges of the two bones approached each other, he could feel a faint, invisible energy flow in the air, creating a subtle resonance between them. That's the feeling. Guye's eyes snapped open. He no longer cared if those damned gaps perfectly matched. He only trusted his intuition. Like a drunken artist, he placed the bones on the ground purely by feel, in a seemingly chaotic manner that actually followed some mysterious rule. Click, click. Time passed, minute by minute. The skeleton on the ground became increasingly complete. It looked like some kind of canine, but its spine had abnormal, blade-like bone spikes. Its skull was much larger than an ordinary dog's, with 2 rows of dense, saw-like sharp teeth in its mouth. When Guye gently placed the last small fragment, which looked like the tip of a tailbone, at the end of the skeleton, buzz, all the pale white bones on the ground instantly lit up with a ghostly, eerie blue light. Containment conditions met. Detected containment individual as living creature type. Generating transformation card. Amidst the codex's cold notification, the glowing bones began to slowly float up from the ground, defying the laws of physics. In midair, they automatically combined perfectly into a complete, ominous monster skeleton. Then, the entire skeleton rapidly contracted and folded in the light, finally transforming into a stream of light that fiercely branded itself into Guye's back. Containment successful. Obtained F-grade transformation card. Skeletal Hound. Already recorded on the second page of the Record of 100 Ghosts. The moment this brand new card was recorded in the codex, a pure warm current surged from the brand on his back into his brain. The feeling was like a gushing spring being forcefully injected into a nearly dry pond. His mental energy, which had been exhausted from piecing together the bones, was not only instantly replenished, but the entire pond's capacity seemed to have expanded by a full circle. New card recorded, soul capacity expanded. Mental strength limit increased, 10-15. Guye's face was filled with joy. Not only did he gain a new transformation form, but even his most fundamental mental strength limit received a permanent boost. He immediately immersed his consciousness into the codex. Transformation card, No 002. Name, Skeletal Hound. Grade, F. Type, Entity Type. Description, an inferior creation formed from the resentment and bones of countless creatures, pieced together in the cemetery of the contaminated zone. It is tireless, fearless of death, a natural hound and cannon fodder. Don't expect much loyalty from it. It simply enjoys the pleasure of tearing. Abilities. 1. Silent Stealth. After transformation, when on all fours, footsteps are absorbed by special structures between the bones, achieving almost absolute silent movement. 2. Sharp Teeth Bite. After transformation, biting force is slightly enhanced. Teeth can easily tear leather and cause physical damage to F-grade bizarre, spiritual bodies. Weaknesses rules. 1. Structural imbalance. Its joint connections are extremely fragile and easily dismembered. However, the dismembered remains still retain activity. 2. Bone collector's instinct. Will be attracted to ownerless bones and prioritize recovering them. Silent stealth. This ability was simply a divine skill tailor-made for sneak attacks and reconnaissance. He was already eager to try out the power of this new form. He glanced around his narrow dorm room, which was less than 10 square meters. The space was too small, but it was enough. Transform into Skeletal Hound. The next second, a completely different sensation from transforming into the contaminated blood spread throughout his body. It wasn't melting, but shattering and reconstruction. Crack, Crack, crack. He heard the teeth-grinding crunch of his bones. His body began to uncontrollably curl downwards, his limbs elongated, his spine protruded outwards, and his skin and flesh seemed to contract inwards, pouring all their power into the mutating bones. An incredibly heavy pressure squeezed in from all directions. The feeling was like an invisible gray giant gripping him tightly with its cold palm. Heavy, oppressive, suffocating. Ah! Guye let out a painful grunt. The transformation process abruptly halted. He could feel his form had become a grotesque half-human, half-dog. But that external pressure, like an invisible wall, stubbornly prevented him from completing the final step of the transformation. This is. A scene flashed through his mind instantly. The commuter vehicle passing through the high wall. Reality stabilization anchor. It was the force field of the high wall. This was the C-ring zone, and although outside the wall, it was still within the 20%–40% radiation range of the stabilization anchor force field. This force field was frantically correcting his body, trying to revert him, this abnormality, back to his normal, human form. Warning: high-intensity reality stabilization force field suppression detected. Transformation card function suppressed by 50%. Mental strength consumption rate increased by 100%. The codex's warning blared frantically. Guye no longer tried to endure. No one knew if there would be a higher-level monitoring alarm on the high wall. He made a decisive move and immediately terminated the transformation. Disengage. With a thud, he reverted to human form and collapsed to the ground, his entire body feeling as if his bones had come apart in excruciating pain. He understood. Under the shadow of this high wall, his greatest trump card was chained. The high wall, with its absolute power of reality, was constantly reminding him. Here, you must be normal. Anything abnormal will be corrected. He slowly picked himself up from the ground and sat back on the creaking bed. He began to calmly consider his current situation. The containment of the two bizarre cards, one relied on luck, the other on courage. But such good fortune couldn't happen every day. Firstly, he couldn't always perform those strange containment actions under his teammates' noses. This time it was devouring and piecing together. What if next time the codex's condition was dance with the target? He would eventually be exposed. Secondly, and most crucially, waiting for company missions was too slow. As Li Fei said, cleaners didn't work every day. Most of the time, they were in the hive, waiting for mission notifications from the company terminal that could ring at any unknown time. Sometimes, they waited for 3 to 5 days. Moreover, the vast majority of missions were unrated, safe missions. Cleaning up contamination residues in an abandoned warehouse, or collecting soil samples from a certain area. Safe, but it also meant no opportunity to encounter live, bizarre entities, let alone earn any recovery commission. Only those occasional dangerous-rated missions were the dinner table for a secret eater like him, but such missions were rare and hard to come by. No, he couldn't passively wait any longer. To entrust his growth to the company's handouts and vague luck was to seek death. He had to find a way to actively and freely contact the bizarre. He also had to find a way to break free from the company and earn extra credit points on his own. Guye's gaze, through the small window, looked towards the direction of Rustbone Street, where neon lights flickered and it was always noisy. There was Wrench's weapon shop. There was Syringe's black clinic. And there was a place he had only heard of in the original owner's memories but had never set foot in, a paradise for desperados. The Bounty Hunters Guild's one-eyed tavern. Perhaps he should go there and take a look. Chapter 13, The One-Eyed Tavern and the Executioner. This thought began to grow wildly like weeds in Guye's mind. He couldn't wait any longer. He didn't even eat dinner, walking straight out of his top-floor dormitory. He followed the exposed Z-shaped staircase of the hive downwards. The wind on the top floor made the tin walls clatter. He passed the 5th and 4th floors, where Li Fei and Chen Hao, the older team members, lived. The clamor and food smells from those hallways were much stronger than on the top floor. Finally, he stopped at the end of a relatively clean and quiet corridor on the 3rd floor. The door in front of him was completely different from the thin metal doors upstairs. It was a solid wood door, seemingly salvaged from some old-world building. The door had even been reinforced with a steel plate around its edge. There was even a fully functional brass peephole beside the door. In this chaotic hive, Such a door was a symbol of status and security itself. Guya took a deep breath, raised his hand, and knocked on the door. "Who is it? Damn it, trying to rush me to my grave." The door creaked open, revealing old man Wang's liquor-scented, impatient face. He was wearing a faded old vest and held half a bottle of black water in his hand. "Captain Wang, it's me," Guya said. "You kid, what's up?" Wang Zhenguo frowned when he saw it was him. Guya said, "I apologize for disturbing you, but I have something I'd like to ask your advice on." His tone was respectful, with a hint of the cautiousness one only shows when facing an elder. Wang Zhenguo's gaze softened slightly. He scrutinized Guyi from head to toe, as if trying to discern something from his face. "Come in," and closed the door. Guya walked into Wang Zhenguo's equally cramped but tobacco and gunpowder-scented room. "Sit." Old man Wang pointed to a stool made from an ammo box, then plopped back down onto his bed. "All right, what is it?" he asked, his voice hoarse, after taking a large gulp of black water. Guya didn't speak immediately. He seemed to be organizing his thoughts, or perhaps steeling himself for a decision. "Captain Wang." He looked up at Wang Zhenguo. "The company's tasks are too few. I want to find another way to earn some extra money. I heard that at the One-Eyed Tavern, you can register as a scavenger." When the words "One-Eyed Tavern" came out of Guya's mouth, Wang Zhenguo's expression instantly changed. Those eyes, usually tinged with a hint of murkiness and fatigue, suddenly became sharp. He didn't speak immediately, but instead re-examined Guya carefully from top to bottom. It was as if he was seeing this quiet young man, whom he had personally recruited, for the first time. Then Wang Zhenguo laughed. "Extra money. Kid, do you know how many newcomers who took jobs from the One-Eyed each year never came back, enough to fill the turbid water river's riverbed?" "I know," Guya nodded. "But I also know that if I just wait for company tasks, I might never be able to afford the worst gun in Wrench's shop." Wang Zhenguo fell silent again. He looked at the young man before him, whose eyes were unusually calm, as if seeing his own restless self from many years ago, after a long while. He finished the remaining half bottle of black water in one gulp, then slammed the empty bottle heavily onto the table. "All right," he said, "I'll take you, but let's be clear, we're just looking, not doing. The rules of that place are 100 times darker than the company's messed-up contracts." "I understand. Put on your thickest coat, cover your face well, let's go." Rust Bone Street at night was even noisier than during the day. The two walked one after another through the crowded streets. "Listen carefully, kid." Wang Zhenguo lowered his voice, as if imparting the oldest survival wisdom. "Bounty hunters sounds impressive, but they're just a bunch of wild dogs with no one to rein them in. Here, they're divided into 3 levels. The lowest are called scavengers. Pay 100 credit points to register your name at the One-Eyed, sign a life-and-death waiver, and you're one of them. They do odd jobs like picking up trash or running errands for big shots. Above that are hunters. You have to complete at least 10 F-rank tasks independently or as a team to apply. At this level, you're qualified to take on jobs that can truly kill you, but also truly make you rich. As for the highest, they're not called hunters anymore, they call themselves executioners." Old man Wang's tone carried a hint of awe. "In the entire C-ring zone, no more than 50 people are qualified to bear that name. Every single one is a ruthless character who has survived encounters with D-rank anomalies. They all have their own private rooms at the One-Eyed." As they spoke, the two had already arrived at the entrance of the One-Eyed Tavern. Unlike the relatively mild atmosphere of the Clockwork Orange, this place exuded a bloodthirsty aura from the entrance, warning strangers to keep their distance. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, Guya felt as if he had walked into a smoking battlefield. The first floor was the public tavern. The air was 10 times thicker than in Clockwork Orange, mixed with the smell of cheap alcohol, sweat, blood, and gunpowder. Every booth held wary-eyed scavengers, their weapons within reach. No one was shouting loudly here, only hushed whispers. Behind the bar, a skinny, one-eyed owner slowly wiped a glass stained with dark red blood. His other eye was replaced by a crude mechanical prosthetic eye made of brass and gears, glowing faintly red. He was one-eyed. "Old Wang, what brings you to my place for a drink today?" One-eyed's mechanical eye flickered when he saw Wang Zhenguo, and a grim smile stretched across his lips, bringing a newcomer to see the sights. Old Man Wang scanned a few credit points with his personal terminal, 2 black waters to ward off bad luck. He led Guyi not directly to the bar, but first to a corner beside the bar, where a row of old terminals was placed. The screens of those terminals were covered in scratches and static, their casings greasy, looking even older than the parts in Wrench's shop. "Look there," Old Man Wang pointed to the machines. "Most of the jobs are on those. F-rank jobs can be taken by anyone. Just swipe your ID card and you can see the task list. We call that the dog food bowl, specifically to feed wild dogs like us." Guyi nodded, but his gaze was involuntarily drawn to the wall at the very back of the tavern. Only a few pieces of paper were tacked to that wall, but each one seemed to carry an invisible pressure. "That wall," Old Man Wang followed his gaze, "we call it the Wall of Glory, also known as the Death List. Only D-rank tasks and above are qualified to be personally nailed up by One-Eyed. Taking on those kinds of jobs isn't just a click on a terminal. You have to walk up to that wall, and under everyone's gaze, tear down that bounty poster. That's a declaration that the task is yours." Guyi's gaze was fixed on that wall. He saw the topmost bounty poster, already somewhat yellowed. C-rank bounty, hunt headless postman, reward 100,000 credit points, B Ring District permanent residency. That string of zeros and the dazzling residency instantly ignited Guyi's pupils like a fire. "Stop looking, damn it." Wang Zhengguo forcefully turned his head back with surprising strength. "That's not something you should be looking at right now. Your world is in the dog food bowl." Just as Guyi's fantasy was cruelly shattered by Old Man Wang, his peripheral vision suddenly caught a familiar figure. In a corner of the bar, Li Fei's sister, Razor, sat quietly alone. She wasn't drinking, only a glass of water was in front of her. The long, cloth-wrapped weapon rested beside her hand. She was unlike anyone else here. She didn't seem to be relaxing, but rather like a leopard in a hunting lull, licking her claws, poised to strike. One-Eyed personally carried a drink over to her, seemingly whispering something. Razor didn't speak, only shook her head. Then she stood up, placed a few black, tooth-like objects on the table, and turned to leave the tavern without looking back. "Captain Wang." Guyi asked quietly, lowering his voice, "Who is that person?" Wang Zhengguo's gaze was more serious than ever before. He watched Razor's disappearing back and slowly uttered 3 words. "Executioner." He paused, seemingly choosing his words carefully. "The executioner I told you about her." Guyi's heart lurched. He hadn't expected to witness a living legend, standing at the pinnacle of this underground world's pyramid so soon. And she's among the craziest and strongest of the executioners. We cleaners have to be on edge when dealing with F-rank anomalies. But her... Old Man Wang paused, picked up his glass, and downed the spicy black water within it. "She hunts E-rank anomalies as prey." Chapter 14, 2 Paths, and a Contract of Indenture. Stepping out of the heavy wooden door of the One-Eyed Tavern, the noisy, lively night wind of Rustbone Street blew over Guyi. But Guyi's heart was still immersed in the immense impact of the bounty notice and Razor's cold back. He followed behind Wang Zhengguo, walking silently. The lingering kick of the spicy black water wine began to surge, making his brain a little sluggish and a little bolder. Finally, at a relatively quiet alley entrance, he couldn't hold back and spoke. "Captain Wang." Wang Zhengguo didn't turn around. "I just can't quite understand." Guyi organized his words. "Li Fei's sister is so powerful. Why does Brother Huzi still have to do this with us?" Today, for 500 credit points, he had argued with the boss of pile of old papers for a long time. Guyi added silently in his heart. Wang Zhengguo's step slowed. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he walked into the shadows of the alley entrance, pulled out another mint cigarette from his pocket, and lit it. The crimson glow flickered on his heavily wrinkled face. "Kid, what do you think of our cleaner job?" he suddenly asked back. "Dangerous, tiring," Guyi said truthfully. "Exactly." Old Man Wang took a deep drag from his cigarette and slowly exhaled. "Exactly." Old Man Wang nodded, then added, "But the pay isn't bad, right?" Guyi was stunned for a moment, then thought about the 530 credit points he had received, and Auntie Liu Fang's fixed monthly salary, and nodded. Compared to the jobs in the original owner's memory, being a cleaner in the C-ring zone was indeed considered a high-paying job. That's right. Old man Wang took a deep drag from his cigarette and slowly exhaled. You think this job is dangerous because you haven't seen anything more dangerous. He flicked the ash from his cigarette, his gaze becoming distant. As dangerous as our job is, it's still a job. We have a company contract and a work permit issued by the Human Federation. Each assignment's credit points are settled separately. The company also pays a fixed basic salary every month. That's called security. Wang Zhengyuo turned his head, his cloudy eyes surprisingly bright in the darkness. But executioners like Razor are different. What they do is risk their lives. They have no contract, no basic salary, and no severance pay. Today, they might take 10,000 or even 100,000 credit points from the one-eyed. Tomorrow, they might become an unclaimed corpse, rotting in some corner of the northern cemetery. They are ghosts living in the shadows. More importantly, Old Man Wang's voice became incredibly solemn. Kid, remember this. In the C-ring zone, being a bounty hunter is like branding yourself with an indelible mark. The garrison troops recruit specially in the C-ring zone every year. But their recruitment regulations clearly state one thing. Anyone with a record of working as a bounty hunter will never be hired. Guya's heart sank sharply. That kid Huzi is an idiot. Wang Zhengyuo took another deep drag from his cigarette, as if trying to inhale all his helplessness into his lungs. He curses this gray millstone every day, but in his heart, he's more naive than anyone. He still dreams of relying on his own efforts, saving enough money, passing the assessment, and becoming a glorious member of the city garrison troops. He still dreams of one day wearing that uniform, walking proudly into the B-ring district as an insider. And then, turning back to pull his sister out of what he considers a quagmire. So, Old Man Wang extinguished his cigarette butt and said slowly, he will never follow his sister's path. As for Razor, she knows better than anyone that the place she's in isn't a quagmire. It's a goddamn hell. She doesn't want Li Fei to get even a speck of this bloody smell. She saw through this fucked-up world earlier than Huzi, so she chose another path. She doesn't help her brother, not because their relationship is bad. On the contrary, she's protecting him. Her circle is too dirty and too dangerous. A foolish kid like Huzi, who's missing a screw, wouldn't even leave bone fragments if he entered for a day. So, Old Man Wang threw the cigarette butt on the ground and ground it out fiercely with his foot. These two siblings are like two stubborn donkeys. One desperately tries to pull the other out of what he thinks is a quagmire. The other desperately tries to prevent the other from falling into the real hell where she is. This is how they protect each other. It's incredibly stupid, but also, no one has the right to judge. Guyi fell silent after listening. He thought, Captain Wang, do you know a little too much? Immediately, he thought of a more realistic question. Captain Wang. He couldn't help but ask. Li Fei's sister is in this line of work. She must have made a lot of enemies, right? Has no one ever thought of using Li Fei to threaten her? Old Man Wang heard this. A flicker of reminiscent light flashed in his cloudy eyes. Yes. He said slowly, how could there not be? Just 3 years ago, a newly risen gang in Slaughterhouse Back Alley was ignorant. They kidnapped Li Fei, wanting to threaten Razor into becoming their exclusive executioner. Old Man Wang lit another cigarette. Guess what happened? Guya didn't speak, just listened quietly. That night, Old Man Wang's voice was very low. That gang wasn't big, but it had 57 people. From their boss to the dog guarding the door. Not a single one survived. Later, the people from the one-eyed went in to collect the bodies. It said that only 57 artworks remained at the scene, meticulously carved down to complete skeletons with a knife. The name, Razor, truly resonated throughout the entire C-ring zone from that night. Old Man Wang said slowly, in a tone almost like a warning. So, now everyone of consequence in the C-ring zone knows. Li Fei is Razor's inverse scale, her vital point. But if you want to touch this inverse scale, you first have to be prepared for your entire family to be carved down to bones. Guya was once again silenced after hearing this. He couldn't help but inwardly curse. Damn it. He cursed silently in his heart. After all this foolish kid Li Fei is the one with the strongest backing in our Squad 7. This absurd yet real contrast made him see his future path more clearly. The righteous path was too slow and too ephemeral. He didn't have Li Fei's naive fantasies. He only believed in the power he held in his own hands. Captain Wang. Guya looked up, his eyes firmer than ever. I've decided. Take me to register. Wang Zhengguo looked at him for a very long time. Finally, he sighed as if resigned to fate. All right, follow me. The two didn't say another word, turned around, and re-entered the one-eyed tavern, filled with the smell of blood and alcohol. This time, Wang Zhengguo didn't take him to look at the bounty board. Instead, he walked directly to the bar, which exuded a dangerous aura. One-eyed. Old man Wang knocked on the bar. Register this kid as a scavenger. The one-eyed's brass prosthetic eye scanned Guyi back and forth, as if evaluating the quality of merchandise. The usual 100 credit points. Before Wang Zhengguo could say anything more, Guya stepped forward, opened his personal terminal. Payment successful, 100 credit points. Watching the already meager balance in his account instantly shrink, Guyi felt a small pang of heartache, but he didn't show any regret. The one-eyed glanced at him, a grim smile pulling at his lips, and from under the bar, dragged out an old, scratched data terminal. Then he threw over a dirty electronic signature pad covered in disclaimers. Name. Guye. Number 734. The one-eyed typed a few characters on the terminal. Sign this, accidental death and voluntary property waiver agreement. Guya picked up the signature pad. The so-called agreement was brutally simple, with only 3 clauses. 1. I voluntarily become a bounty hunters. During missions, all deaths and injuries are unrelated to this tavern. 2. After my death, all remaining property will be handled by this tavern. 3. This tavern reserves the final right of interpretation for all bounty missions. This was a complete and utter indentured servitude contract. But Guya thought that if he was dead, he wouldn't care so much, so he didn't hesitate. He picked up the electronic pen and signed his name on the pad. All right. The one-eyed confirmed the signature, pulled out a dog tag-like ID card, stamped from inferior metal, from under the bar, and threw it over. The front of the tag was engraved with the one-eyed logo. The back had a line of cold engraving. Scavenger, number 734. Take it. From now on, you'll be qualified to take F-class bounties. The one-eyed put away the terminal and resumed wiping his glasses as if nothing had happened. One last piece of advice, kid. When you die out there, try to die gracefully. Don't make my people have to painstakingly dig your broken tag out of that pile of rotten flesh. Guyi clutched the cold metal tag, its edges even a little sharp, and nodded firmly. I understand. He and Wang Zhengguo walked out of the tavern together. The night wind of Rust Bone Street blew on his face, a little cold. Wang Zhengguo didn't say any more useless words like, be careful. He just patted Guya's shoulder. The path is your own choice. Whether you live or die depends on your own ability. With that, he walked alone towards the hive, without looking back. Guya stood in place, opening his palm. The metal tag engraved with 734 reflected the bizarre, cold light of the surrounding neon signs in his palm. This was his first ticket into this underground world. Chapter 15. Textbooks in an abandoned school campus. At noon the day after signing that contract of servitude at the One-Eyed Tavern, Guyi was in his dorm, studying the cold scavenger ID tag. The old company terminal in the common lounge suddenly beeped without warning. A mission had arrived. Can a guy even catch his breath? Li Fei was the first to spring from the worn-out sofa, grumbling under his breath, but his body honestly began checking his gear. We just rested for 1 day, and Fatty Ma is already working us like donkeys. It's good enough to have work, stop complaining so much. Auntie Liu Fang was stuffing spare purification spray and batteries into her logistics bag. The indulgence and laughter from Clockwork Orange 2 days ago still lingered on their lips. But now, everyone's faces quickly reverted to the numb yet vigilant expressions characteristic of cleaners. This was their life. Warmth was fleeting, danger and toil were the norm. When there were no missions, they worried about their livelihood. When missions came, they worried about their lives. Stop dawdling. Pack your things quickly, prepare to depart. Wang Zhengyue walked in, wearing his perpetually dark jacket, his voice as steady as ever. Where is it this time? Chen Hao asked, raising his head. Old man Wang glanced at the terminal screen. West of the city, the abandoned third primary school. Mission requirements. Clear residual low concentration pollution. Check for any newly generated F-level anomalous entities. He paused, then added. System assessment, risk level, low. Everyone stay alert, don't get shipwrecked in a ditch. Half an hour later, the dilapidated commuter vehicle once again drove out of Rust-Bone Street. The abandoned third primary school was located in a gray zone at the junction of the C-ring zone and the contaminated zone. This area was once a bustling residential district, but it was mercilessly abandoned 10 years ago. The commuter vehicle stopped in front of the school's rusty iron gate. On the iron gate, the Human Federation warning sign, a crossed bone, and the words "No entry" was crudely sprayed in red paint. Monkey, glasses, you two are responsible for perimeter pollution detection. Old man Wang began giving orders. Zio Qi, once you're inside, you're responsible for scouting the second and third floors. Aunt Liu, Aye, you two are with me, responsible for cleaning and checking the first floor. Is that clear? Clear. Everyone responded in unison. Action. Li Fei and Chen Hao immediately took out their detectors and began working on the school's perimeter. Old man Wang, with a large hydraulic shear, snapped the chain on the gate. Creak. The iron gate, which had not been opened for at least 10 years, let out a grating groan and slowly opened. A smell mixed with dust, mold, and rotting paper wafted out. Gu Yi followed Old Man Wang into this campus forgotten by the world. The playground was overgrown with waist-high weeds. The rusty slide was entwined with vines, like an abandoned steel skeleton. Several dried, unknown bird carcasses were scattered on the ground. The walls of the teaching building were covered with moss and cracks. Most of the window panes were shattered, dark and cavernous, like empty eyes. The entire campus was eerily quiet. Only their shuffling sounds as they stepped on gravel and dry leaves could be heard. Everyone, be careful, watch your step. Old Man Wang reminded them in a low voice. The three walked into the teaching building lobby on the first floor. The lobby was dim, and some faded and peeling children's drawings could still be seen on the walls. In the drawings, children used naive strokes to depict blue skies, white clouds, and a brightly smiling sun. But this warm scene was marred by a huge black mold stain that spread down from the ceiling. The mold stain, like an ugly scar, seemed to swallow the entire sun. Let's get to work. Old Man Wang pointed to the mold stains. Aunt Liu, use purification liquid number 3. Aye, you come with me to check the classrooms. All right. Liu Fang skillfully took a high-pressure spray bottle from her logistics bag and began cleaning the pollution residues. Gu Yi, following Old Man Wang, pushed open the door of the first classroom in the corridor. It was a classroom for younger grades. Small desks and chairs were still haphazardly arranged. The chalk on the podium was broken into several pieces, scattered on the dusty teacher's desk. The last lesson's notes remained on the blackboard, the handwriting already blurred. Everything seemed to be frozen in time, in that afternoon more than a decade ago. Guya's gaze was quickly drawn to a propaganda poster on the wall. It was a cartoon-style propaganda poster specifically for children. In the drawing, a little boy in a yellow raincoat had his back to a pale human face with an eerie smile. The eyes of the face were marked with large red crosses. Below the poster, a slogan was written in striking, colorful letters. Children, please remember, if you encounter a smiling man, please do not look into its eyes. Guya stared at the words, a chill running up his spine. This feeling was too bizarre. It was like reading a bloody and terrifying description of a murder scene in a fairy tale book. He suppressed the discomfort in his heart and walked to a row of desks. Some textbooks were scattered on the tables. He casually picked one up, blowing off the dust. The cover was printed with a line of colorful, also cartoon-style, large characters. F-Level Hazardous Species Codex, Illustrated Edition. New Era Primary School, 2nd grade, 1st semester. He opened this textbook belonging to the new generation. The first page showed an ear with wings. The text below introduced it. Name, Echobat. Habits prefers to stay in absolutely quiet enclosed spaces, attracted by sudden sounds. Hazards can shatter human eardrums with ultrasound. Response maintains silence or drive it away with continuous noise exceeding 80 decibels. The second page depicted the smiling man from the propaganda poster on the wall. Name, Smiling Man. Habits mimics humans, likes to observe from behind. Hazards, if you make eye contact with it for more than 3 seconds, it will appear behind you and snap your neck. Response, absolutely do not look back at it. Page after page. Guye flipped through mechanically. In this so-called textbook, there were no Tang poems or song lyrics, no addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. There were only survival rules, one after another, bought with blood and lives. Their lives, from the moment they learned to read, were forced to learn how to coexist with these nightmares walking among humans. Guye closed the textbook, his mood somewhat heavy. Just then, Lin Zioki's somewhat hurried voice suddenly came through the walkie-talkie. "Captain, you guys quickly come to the science lab on the second floor. Something's not right here." Chapter 16, The Second Time Stealing Food. Lin Zioki's voice carried a hint of barely suppressed tension. "Received, we'll be right there." Wang Zhengguo replied into the walkie-talkie, his expression instantly turning serious. He looked back at Guye and said in a deep voice, "Yi, stick close to me. Aunt Liu, you guard the staircase on the first floor, ready to provide support at any time." "All right." Wang Zhengguo and Guye no longer lingered, quickly rushing out of the classroom and heading up the dusty stairs to the second floor. The corridor on the second floor was even dimmer than the first. The walls were covered everywhere with large patches of water stains and mold. The air was filled with a strong, pungent smell, a mixture of chemical agents and decaying matter. At the end of the corridor, a wooden door with a science laboratory sign hung ajar. Lin Zioki's petite figure stood at the doorway, waving to them with a solemn expression. "Captain, Brother Yi, look." She pointed to the laboratory floor. Guye looked in the direction she pointed, his pupils slightly contracting. At the entrance of the laboratory, extending inward, were clearly imprinted a series of wet footprints, as if someone had just crawled out of water. The footprints were small, like those of a child, but the edge of each footprint carried an abnormal, dark red trace, as if rusted. "When I came up, this wasn't here yet." Lin Zioki lowered her voice, a hint of lingering fear on her face. "I was scouting on the third floor just now and heard the sound of glass breaking over here. When I came down to check, it was like this." Wang Zhengguo's face was so grim it looked like it could drip water. He slowly drew the old-fashioned revolver from his waist, then gestured caution to Guye and Lin Zioki. "Sparrow, you guard the door and watch for movement in the corridor. Yi, you come in with me to take a look." "Yes." Wang Zhengguo led the way, with Guye following closely behind. The two of them, one after another, cautiously stepped into the ominous-smelling laboratory. The laboratory was a mess. Tables and chairs were overturned, and glass fragments from various experimental equipment were scattered all over the floor. The pungent chemical smell was even stronger here. Guye's gaze quickly swept across the entire room. On the laboratory floor, there were dark red, wet little footprints everywhere, in disarray, as if an invisible child had just caused a ruckus here. And in the innermost corner of the laboratory, a large glass specimen cabinet had been violently smashed from the inside. Formalin liquid flowed all over the floor, emitting a pungent odor. Inside the cabinet, the glass jars originally used to soak various biological specimens were toppled over, most of them already empty. Wang Zhengguo held his gun, approaching the broken specimen cabinet step by step, extremely slowly. Guye was responsible for guarding his back. It was at this moment that Guye's peripheral vision suddenly caught sight of something left behind in a corner. It was a glass jar that wasn't completely broken. The jar lay on the ground, most of the formalin having already flowed out, and at the bottom of the jar, in the remaining bit of cloudy liquid, was submerged a human hand specimen. The hand was pale, slightly swollen from being soaked in the liquid. The 5 fingers were in an unnatural, curled posture, and in its nail beds and the creases of its palm, traces of dark red, like rust, seeped out. Almost the instant he saw that hand specimen, the cold, mechanical voice of the bizarre compendium sounded in Guye's mind without warning. "Scanned a containable individual." Name, Rusty Hand. Grade, F. Type, entity/inanimate. Description, a specimen that has undergone deformation under the dual effects of resentment and chemical agents. It yearns to regain tactile sensation and will touch all living things with its rust-poisoned hand. Inanimate. For the first time, Guya felt a question about this classification in his heart. Previously, for the contaminated blood, the Codex's classification was living. What was the difference between the two? Before he could ponder, the crucial piece of information had already surfaced in his mind. Containment condition. Kiss it for 5 seconds. The moment he saw this information, Guya's stomach churned. Kiss it, and for 5 seconds? He looked at the human hand specimen, soaked in cloudy liquid, swollen skin, and eerie rust, and a strong sense of nausea rushed straight to his head. This was 100 times more disgusting than swallowing blood moss last time. Yi, target spotted. Just then, Wang Zhengyuo's low roar from ahead interrupted his thoughts. Gu Yi suddenly looked up. He saw Wang Zhengyuo half-crouching in front of the broken specimen cabinet, pointing his gun at a dark corner beneath the cabinet. This guy, he crawled under the cabinet. He looked back and winked at Gu Yi. I'll lure it out, and you figure out a way to attack its core from the side. Okay. Gu Yi immediately responded, but in his heart, he had another, bolder and crazier plan. Old Man Wang must have found the little monster that was running around, mutated from other specimens. And this rusty hand right before his eyes seemed to have not been discovered by them yet. This was an opportunity, a great opportunity to steal a bite right under his teammates' noses, but the risk was equally great. He had to divert Old Man Wang in an extremely short time and complete that utterly disgusting containment condition. Guya's brain raced. Captain. He suddenly spoke, his voice carrying just the right amount of tension. It seems there's more than one of these things. Over here. Under the cabinet on my left, it seems like there's movement too. Wang Zhengyuo's expression changed upon hearing this. Which direction? Right under this lab bench on my left. Guya pointed in a completely opposite direction, making it up on the spot. Damn it, this is troublesome. Wang Zhengyuo cursed. He didn't doubt Guya's judgment as a newcomer. In this environment, any slight disturbance could be fatal. You hold steady, don't let it get close. I'll deal with mine here, then come over to help you right away. Wang Zhengyuo immediately made a decision. With that, he no longer hesitated and suddenly kicked the bottom of the cabinet in front of him. Bang. A loud bang, accompanied by the sound of breaking glass. Screech. A thin, monkey-like black shadow let out a piercing shriek and suddenly darted out from under the cabinet. It was a deformed monster pieced together from various animal bones and rotten flesh, also covered in wet rust. Now. The moment Wang Zhengyuo's attention was completely drawn to that monster, Guya moved. He lunged forward, rushing to the glass jar containing the rusty hand. There was no time for hesitation. He suppressed the churning nausea in his stomach and snatched the slimy, cold human hand specimen out of the jar. Then, he closed his eyes, held his breath, and fiercely kissed the swollen, cold, and formalin-smelling back of the hand. MMPH. An indescribable, disgusting smell, a mixture of corpse and chemicals, instantly filled his mouth and nasal cavity. A cold, slimy, rotten flesh-like sensation spread from his lips to every nerve ending in his body. Guya's body trembled violently. He felt like he was about to vomit, but he gritted his teeth, frantically counting in his mind. 1 second, 2 seconds, containment conditions met detected. 3 seconds, containment protocol establishing. 4 seconds, energy link generated. 5 seconds, containment successful. The instant the Codex's prompt sounded, the disgusting specimen in Guya's hand instantly transformed into a dark red stream of light, disappearing into his back. Immediately after, a series of brand new, unexpected prompts exploded in Guya's mind. Detected, inanimate bazaar. Meets armament card generation conditions. New functional module activated, cabinet of marvels. Generated armament card. No 001 rusty hand, automatically recorded on the first page of the cabinet of marvels. New card recorded, soul capacity expanded. Mental strength limit increased. 15-20. In an instant, Guyi felt as if his bizarre compendium had undergone a small-scale system upgrade. The original single-page codex was now clearly divided into two distinct pages. The left page was still the record of 100 ghosts. On it, the card representing the contaminated blood glowed faintly. In the upper right corner of the card, a clear designation was marked Transformation Card, and on the right, there was a completely new page, glowing with a bronze luster. At the top of the page, 3 large characters were written in an ancient script, Cabinet of Marvels. At this moment, in the first slot of the Cabinet of Marvels, a brand new, ominous dark red card was slowly condensing into form. In the upper right corner of the card, its type was also marked Armament Card. It worked, and it even unlocked a brand new function. The immense surprise instantly diluted the disgusting taste in his mouth. Guya suddenly opened his eyes, about to smile, but was stimulated by the taste in his mouth and almost dry-heaved on the spot. Ah ye. How are things on your side? Not far away, Wang Zhengguo's anxious roar came, accompanied by a deafening gunshot. The deformed monster had evidently been dealt with. Guya took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the nausea, and immediately shouted back in Old Man Wang's direction. Captain, the thing on my side, seems to have stopped moving again. It might have been scared away by your gunshot. Chapter 17 New Card, Rusty Hand. Wang Zhengguo had no doubts when he heard Guya's answer. In the contaminated zone, the bizarre compendium's behavior patterns were already strange and varied. Being scared away by gunshots or temporarily lying dormant were both very normal situations. It was lucky to escape. Old Man Wang spat, walked forward, and kicked the rapidly blackening monster remains on the ground with his toe. Contaminant Bone Stitcher, a small, brainless, and worthless thing. He put away his revolver and said to Lin Zai-Oki, who had rushed over, Sparrow, notify Monkey and the others that the perimeter alert can be lifted. Then, bring strong purification liquid and thoroughly clean this place. The residual contamination from this thing is highly toxic. Yes, Lin Zai-Oki responded immediately. Old Man Wang then turned his head and looked Guyi up and down. Kid, are you all right? Why is your face so pale? No, nothing. Guyi quickly shook his head, trying to make his expression look a little more normal. I was a bit nervous just now. It's my first time encountering something like this. HMPH, what a wimp. Old Man Wang snorted, but there was no blame in his tone. You'll get used to it after a few more times. As he spoke, he patted Guya's shoulder with such force that it almost made Guya stumble. Guya forced a smile that was uglier than a cry, nodding repeatedly. He certainly wasn't scared. He was disgusted. Even now, his mouth still had that terrifying taste of formaldehyde mixed with rotten flesh, making him feel completely unwell. Soon, Li Fei and Chen Hao also rushed in from outside. Seeing the mess in the laboratory, Li Fei yelled out, Damn, so lively. Old Wang, you guys took all the good stuff, not even leaving us a drop of soup. You talk too much. Auntie Liu Fang walked in, carrying cleaning tools, and gave him an annoyed glare. Hurry up and work, finish early, go home early. The subsequent cleaning work became uneventful. With a clear objective, the members of Squad 7 displayed extremely professional conduct. Spraying purification liquid, scraping off contaminated residues, performing secondary sterilization with UV lamps. Each step was orderly and well-coordinated. Guya also endured his discomfort and joined the cleaning work. While working, Guya secretly immersed his consciousness into the bizarre compendium in his mind. His consciousness skipped over the record of 100 ghosts on the left and settled on the brand new, bronze-glowing Cabinet of Marvels on the right page. In the first slot of the Cabinet of Marvels, that brand new card was quietly emitting a dark red glow. In the card's image, the background was a dimly lit science laboratory. Broken glassware was scattered everywhere, and various deformed organisms were soaking in specimen jars in the background. In the very center of the image was a stained glass jar. In the murky, yellowish formaldehyde liquid, a pale, swollen human hand was pressed tightly against the inner wall of the glass jar. Dark red patterns, like rust or dried blood, spread in the nail beds of the 5 fingers and beneath the skin on the back of the hand. Guya concentrated, and the card's detailed information clearly appeared on his retina like a projection. Armament card, No 001. Name, Rusty Hand. Grade, F. Type, entity/inanimate. Description, a specimen that mutated under the dual effects of resentment and chemical agents. It yearns to regain touch and will use its hand, tainted with rust toxins, to touch all living things. Abilities. 1. Manifestation. Can consume mental energy to manifest it in human or transformed form, using it as an equipment or prop. 2. Touch of rust. After manifestation, it can be commanded for remote control. The rust toxin secreted by its palm can quickly rust metal and cause continuous burning damage to biological tissues. Note, this effect is ineffective against stabilizing anchor alloy. Weaknesses. 1. Strong acid. Strong acid with a concentration exceeding 75% can rapidly dissolve its surface rust layer and inhibit its activity. 2. Dry environment. Extremely dry environments will slow down its movements. 3. High temperature. Continuous high-temperature burning can ignite the adipocere oil within it, causing irreversible damage. Looking at this brand new file, Guya's heart pounded uncontrollably. Manifestation, remote control, this was a completely different way of using it compared to the transformation of a transformation card. He no longer needed to turn himself into a bizarre compendium, but could use the bizarre compendium as a prop or pet. This discovery made Guya's scalp tingle with excitement. This meant that his fighting style would no longer be limited to melee. He forcibly suppressed his inner excitement and glanced around. Old Man Wang and Liu Fang were cleaning at the other end of the corridor. Li Fei and Lin Zioki were downstairs, and Chen Hao was debugging equipment at the door. He was the only one in the lab for the moment. An opportunity. He decided to try out what this so-called manifestation was all about. He didn't know if this armament card could still be successfully manifested in the C-ring zone, which was suppressed by the stabilizing anchor force field of the high walls after leaving the contaminated zone. Guya took a deep breath, walked to an abandoned iron experimental bench, pretending to be cleaning stains off the surface. At the same time, in his mind, he issued a command to the rusty hand card. Manifest. Buzz. A faint mental energy, like a stream, flowed from his brain and into the codex. The next second, an incredible sight occurred. The light in the air in front of him twisted slightly. Immediately after, a pale, swollen, severed hand, exactly like the one on the card, appeared out of thin air. It floated silently in midair, its 5 fingers slightly curled, with dark red rust still in the nail beds. It had no physical form, like a translucent ghost emitting an ominous aura. Guya could even smell the faint, strange odor of formaldehyde mixed with rust emanating from that ghost hand. Even more miraculously, a subtle mental link was established between him and this hand. It was like he had an extra limb that he could control at will. Guya's heart stirred, and he tried to issue a simple command. Forward. The floating ghost hand immediately obediently drifted a short distance forward. Clench fist. The ghost hand immediately curled its 5 fingers, forming a fist. Too awesome. Guya roared frantically in his mind. This was simply psychic remote control from a sci-fi movie. He suppressed his excitement, his gaze falling on the rusty iron experimental bench in front of him. The final test. Touch it. He issued an attack command to the rusty hand. The translucent ghost hand, like a hound that had received a command, silently floated above the experimental bench and then slowly pressed down. Sizzle. Where the ghost hand pressed, the thick rust, along with the steel tabletop beneath it, quickly blackened and softened at a visible speed, corroding into a clear handprint. A wisp of green smoke slowly rose from the handprint. What a domineering ability! Guya's heart filled with joy. After playing for a while, Guya cut off the mental link. The rusty hand in midair instantly turned into dots of red light and disappeared, but the deep, still smoking, corrosive handprint remained clearly on the experimental bench. Guya looked at the handprint and understood. Transformation cards were his spear, used for charging into battle. And this armament card was his dagger, his hidden weapon, a trump card that allowed him to launch a fatal blow from an unexpected place. Stealth, lockpicking, destruction, assassination. This small F-grade armament card had already opened up countless new tactical possibilities for him. He began to eagerly anticipate the day when his cabinet of marvels would be completely filled with all sorts of bizarre equipment. The cleaning work continued until dusk. When everyone dragged their tired bodies back onto the dilapidated shuttle bus, exhaustion was etched on every face. Finally done. Li Fei slumped in his seat like a puddle of mud. Damn it, I never want to take another school job again. It's more tiring than cleaning sewers. All right, it's good enough to earn something. Auntie Liu Fang counted the list of consumables for this mission, muttering. This time we used 3 bottles of strong purification liquid. When I go back to report, I can apply for more funds. The carriage returned to its usual noisy and relaxed state after a mission. Guya leaned by the window, watching the rapidly receding ruins outside, but his heart couldn't relax at all, because he discovered a very serious after effect. He was thirsty just now. He took out his water bottle from his backpack, unscrewed the cap, and took a big gulp. However, when that mouthful of clean, pure water flowed over his tongue and down his throat, his brows instantly furrowed into a knot. The taste of the water was wrong. The originally sweet, clear water now carried a strong, nauseating taste of rust. It was as if he wasn't drinking water, but a mouthful of rusty soup with nails in it. Guya couldn't hold it in and spat out all the water. Damn it, Yi, what are you doing? Li Fei, who was sitting opposite him, was sprayed all over and jumped up on the spot. I'm sorry, I choked. Guya quickly apologized, wiping indiscriminately with a tissue. What's wrong with you, kid? Your face has been looking off since earlier. Li Fei wiped the water from his face, leaned over, and looked at him suspiciously. Were you ambushed by something in there? No, really not. Guya waved his hands repeatedly. He couldn't very well say that he had secretly kissed a severed hand soaked in formaldehyde, could he? He'd be considered a pervert. Then why does your mouth smell like rust? Li Fei's nose was as sharp as a dog's. He leaned close to Guya's mouth, sniffed, and then recoiled with a look of disgust. Damn it, Yi, tell me honestly, were you so hungry that you secretly gnawed on the iron railings at school? His joke caused a burst of laughter in the carriage. Even Lin Zioki couldn't help but let out a giggle. Guya's face instantly turned bright red. He could only laugh awkwardly, waving his hands repeatedly, saying he might be a little anemic. The matter was passed off as a joke. But Guya couldn't laugh at all in his heart. He knew very well that this wasn't anemia. This was an after effect of containing the rusty hand. That disgusting kiss not only allowed him to complete the containment, but it also seemed to have caused a temporary contamination of his sense of taste with the rust attribute of that severed hand. He just didn't know how long this contamination would last. Guya secretly pursed his lips again. Indeed, that strong taste of rust still stubbornly lingered on his tongue. Now, everything he looked at seemed like a rusty piece of iron. The water bottle was iron, the seat was iron, and even Li Fei's smirking face looked rusty. Damn it. Guya cursed that damned rusty hand 100 times in his mind. It seemed that the containment of the bizarre compendium was not without cost. Each time he stole a bite. While gaining power, he also seemed to inevitably pick up some disgusting souvenirs from those foul entities. He couldn't help but feel a chill. This time it was taste. What about next time? If he contained a bizarre compendium that required direct gaze to fulfill its conditions, would his eyes only see a blood-red world for the entire next day? If he contained a bizarre compendium that required listening, would his ears be filled with non-existent mad ravings? Guya shivered. At this moment, he had a deeper and more personal understanding of the contaminating nature of the bizarre compendium. He had to be more careful and more cautious. Otherwise, one day, he would be completely assimilated by these foul powers into a true monster. Chapter 18, Odd Jobs and Taverns. After the mission at the abandoned primary school, Squad 7 got another day of rest. Guya didn't waste it. He locked himself in his dorm, repeatedly familiarizing himself with the use of his new toy, the rusty hand, until his mental energy was depleted, then fell into a deep sleep. He knew more than ever that to become stronger, he had to actively seek out more anomalies and absorb more nutrients. Relying solely on the safe missions, that the company provided only once every 3 to 5 days was tantamount to waiting for death. He had to make money, get intelligence, and earn extra cash. Early the next morning, before dawn, Guya left the hive. He didn't go to the One-Eyed Tavern immediately. Bounty missions were too risky. He wanted to see if there were any safer, quicker temporary jobs available first. Following his memory, he arrived at the area bordering the South District and the West District's turbid pool. This was the C Ring Zone's largest odd job market, and the people of Rust Bone Street called it the Flesh Market. The meaning was clear. What was sold here was human lives and strength. The sky was still dim, but the place was already bustling with noise. Countless ragged men, like a flock of livestock waiting to be chosen, squeezed into this muddy open space. The air was filled with the stench of sweat, cheap mint, cigarette smoke, the exhaust fumes of poorly burned inferior fuel, and also an invisible scent of despair and anxiety. Burly foremen stood on the roofs of their respective trucks, shouting themselves hoarse, vying for the day's cheap labor. Turbid water river dredging, 3 more needed, 80 credit points a day per person, 1 meal of nutrient paste included. A foreman with a fleshy face waved the data pad in his hand. As soon as he finished speaking, over a dozen strong men pounced like hungry wolves, almost fighting over the 3 spots. West District garbage mountain sorting, paid by the basket. Fast workers can earn 100 a day. Come if you don't value your life. Another foreman, thin as a monkey, had a sharp voice. Significantly fewer people gathered around him. Everyone knew that the contamination value at the garbage mountain was terrifyingly high. Working there for a day meant at least 2 bottles of black water were needed afterward to suppress the contamination value. In the end, it wasn't worth much money. Suddenly, a huge, nauseating stench, accompanied by the roar of a truck engine, came from the direction of the West District. The crowd automatically parted, creating a path. A massive heavy-duty truck, its bed covered with a thick tarpaulin, slowly drove into the flesh market. On the truck's cab, a bloody butcher's cleaver logo was painted. The Butcher Gang, the largest gang force in the South District. The truck came to a stop, and a bare-chested strong man with a ferocious pig's head tattooed on his chest jumped out of the driver's cab. He kicked the truck bed and bellowed at the crowd in a booming voice. The Butcher Gang is hiring porters to move the corpses of giant sludge pigs. Strong men come, 120 per person. Get paid immediately after finishing. As soon as he finished speaking, a suppressed commotion, mixed with fear and greed, arose from the crowd. Giant sludge pigs were the most disgusting specialty of the West District's turbid water river. They were deformed creatures spawned by devouring industrial waste and garbage. It was said that their corpses were slippery and foul-smelling, and also slightly corrosive. If one handled them with bare hands, a layer of skin could easily rot off. But the price of 120 credit points a day was a fatal temptation for these manual laborers. Guyu was jostled back and forth in the crowd. He watched the men fighting tooth and nail for a job worth a few dozen credit points, his heart cold. His small frame had no competitiveness compared to the burly men around him. Not to mention snatching a job from the Butcher Gang, he couldn't even squeeze in front of the foreman for the safest, dredging work. He quickly realized that this path was also a dead end. He wasn't cut out for manual labor. His only advantages were his mind and the secret hidden within his body. It seemed that ultimately he still had to go to that place. Guya sighed, squeezed out of the suffocating crowd of the flesh market, turned around and walked towards the one-eyed tavern. Pushing open the heavy wooden door again, the tavern was as quiet and oppressive as ever. Because it was daytime, there were far fewer people than last time. Guyi ignored the scrutinizing gazes. He was now a registered scavenger, qualified to stand here. He deliberately avoided looking at the D-Class Bounty, Wall of Glory, and instead walked straight to the side of the bar, to a row of greasy public mission terminals. He pulled out the cold metal identity tag engraved with 734 from his pocket. Mimicking the person next to him, he pressed his identity tag onto a scratched sensor area of the terminal. Beep. The screen flickered, the static disappeared, and an extremely rudimentary, text-only interface appeared. Welcome, Scavenger 734. Permission level, F. Below that were scrolling lines of F-class bounty missions, visible only to his rank. Guyi began to scroll the screen, browsing carefully. Mission: collect howling moss from the periphery of the silent camp in the North District. Reward: 200 credit points. Status: available. Mission: map the terrain of the number 1 abandoned pump station downstream of the turbid water river in the West District. Reward: 350 credit points. Status: taken. Mission: assist Dr. Syringe in capturing 3 mutated blood leeches. Reward: 50 credit points. Status: available. Mission: clear the blockage at the number 3 garbage compression station on Rust Bone Street. Reward: 80 credit points. Status: available. Mission: test the new batch of Blackwater liquor at the Clockwork Orange bar. Reward: 100 credit points plus free drinks for the night. Status: taken. Mission: collect metal fragments from the sewage outlet of Thespel's Recovery Center in the East District. Reward: paid by weight, 20 credit points per kilogram. Status: available long-term. Mission: collect protection fees from several designated nails in the Water Rat Maze in the South District. Reward: 10% commission of the total collected. Status: taken. Mission: replace the rainproof tarp on the roof of the pile of old papers black market in the South District. Reward: 60 credit points. Status: available. Just as he was intently searching for his target among the various bounty requests, a suppressed quarrel from a nearby table caught his attention. "I don't believe it. Third brother couldn't have just gone crazy like that." One voice was filled with anger and unwillingness. "Lower your voice. Do you want to attract everyone?" Another voice sounded even hoarser and more tired. "The garrison troops came to ask questions 2 days ago, and the conclusion was mental derangement, self-departure." "Bullshit." The angry voice was suppressed. "Third brother was fine last week." "It's because he told me that someone near his home would always hum some inaudible tunes in the middle of the night. He also said that on the wall by his door, someone had scratched a small red circle. And then, 2 days later, he was like a lost soul, humming that ghostly tune every day. Yesterday morning, he just jumped off the roof himself." "Shut up." The hoarse voice sharply stopped him. "Do you have any evidence for what you're saying? That red circle has long been scraped off. The singing, who the hell heard it? Haven't there been enough strange occurrences around the stomach area lately? Old man Wang in the West District also kept saying he heard singing, and then he fell headfirst into the turbid water river. There was no red circle at his door. This is not a coincidence at all. Then what do you want to do? Go tell One Eye, or go tell the garrison troops? Say your friend committed suicide because he heard ghost stories. See if they'll arrest you as the next lunatic." The argument ended there. One Eye, behind the bar, swept his brass eye coldly towards them. The 2 men at that table instantly fell silent, picked up their glasses, and took a big gulp. But those few scattered words like hooks caught in Guya's mind. Red circle. Singing. Mental derangement. He silently committed these words to memory. He decided to find an opportunity later to ask old man Wang, who was well informed. For now, business was more important. He refocused his attention on the bounty board. He needed money, he needed strength, he needed to first be able to stand firm in this damned, gray millstone. His gaze scanned the F-class bounty requests from top to bottom. Collect howling moss from the periphery of the silent camp in the North District. No, too far, and those lunatics are very exclusive. Map the terrain of the number 1 abandoned pump station downstream of the turbid water river in the West District. This one's good, but it requires professional surveying tools, and it's already been taken. Assist Dr. Syringe in capturing 3 mutated blood leeches. The reward is only 50 credit points, and he'd have to deal with that perverted doctor. No thanks. His finger kept scrolling down. Just as he was about to give up, his gaze was drawn to a faded, seemingly long-listed mission at the very bottom of the list. That mission didn't even have a proper title. Mission: recover a personal item left on an abandoned platform of Subway Line 3. Requirement: a silver lighter engraved with Y. Reward: 600 credit points. Note: there may be a small number of echo bats inhabiting the subway tunnel. Please assess the risk yourself. Publisher: anonymous. Status: available solo. Subway tunnel? Guya's eyes instantly lit up. That place, with its enclosed environment and complex terrain, was perfect for someone like him who needed to conceal his abilities. Moreover, the objective was clear, and the reward was generous. Most importantly, there were echo bats inside. That was one of the most typical F-class anomalies he had seen in his primary school textbook before. This meant that on this mission, he could not only earn money but also potentially unlock a brand new codex entry. This was practically a beginner's mission tailor-made for him. He no longer hesitated. He reached out his hand and, under the slightly surprised gazes of the few hunters, heavily tapped the large, pixelated accept button on the screen. Buzz. The old terminal emitted a grating sound. Then, from a slot below, it slowly spit out a somewhat blurry paper voucher. Chapter 19: Preparations Before the Hunt. After leaving the One-Eyed Tavern, Guya didn't immediately go home. The 600 credit points reward was a huge sum for him now, but he also knew that high returns inevitably came with high risks. The One-Eyed place was not a charity. Since this mission had been posted for so long without anyone taking it, it proved that it was definitely not as simple as it appeared on the surface. Possibly a small number of echo bats inhabit the area. This sentence, when translated, means there are definitely echo bats in there, and the number and size depend entirely on your luck. Guya was not a hothead. He took a deep breath of the air in Rust Bone Street, which was mixed with various smells, forced himself to calm down, and then turned and walked towards a place he was most familiar with and trusted most, Wang Zhengguo's dormitory. Bang bang. Who is it? The door opened, and old man Wang's face, smelling of alcohol, appeared. When he saw Guya standing outside the door, holding a mission certificate printed from the One-Eyed Tavern, the drunkenness on his face instantly faded by more than half. You brat, you really went and took it. His voice suddenly sank. Come in. Guya followed him into the room filled with the smell of tobacco and gunpowder. Old man Wang didn't scold him, nor did he try to persuade him. He just took the mission certificate and, under the dim light, carefully read it for a full 3 minutes. Subway line 3, that cursed place again. He put down the certificate, took a big gulp of black water, and then stared at Guya with an extremely serious look. Kid, I ask you, what do you know about echo bats? Guya was stunned for a moment, then replied. The codex at school says they like quiet, are attracted to sound, attack with ultrasound, and their weakness is continuous noise. Bullshit. Old man Wang interrupted him roughly. If that textbook stuff could get you back alive, the death rate of scavengers would have dropped by half. He pointed at Guya and said, word by word. You listen to me and remember. First, although echo bats are blind, their vision in the dark is 100 times better than yours. Don't you dare think it's safe if you don't make a sound. Second, they are not attracted by sound, they hunt with sound. Any movement you make in their ears is giving them your coordinates. Third, and most importantly, those beasts are gregarious. If you see one, it means there are at least 20 more hidden where you can't see them. And in a colony, there will definitely be a larger bat king with stronger ultrasound. Every word from old man Wang was like a heavy hammer, striking Guya's heart, making cold sweat break out on his back. These were all experiences gained at the cost of lives, which textbooks would never write about. Old man Wang looked at his slightly pale face, and his gaze softened a little. He knew this kid had really taken his words to heart. You think just plugging your ears with any earmuffs will do? I'm telling you, the cry of just one of those things is enough to make you suffer. It can make you half-deaf on the spot, your brain feeling like it's been hit with a blunt object, the world spinning, unable to stand steady. But that's just the appetizer. Old man Wang's expression became incredibly serious. Once you encounter a nest, dozens of them howling at you simultaneously, that's what's truly deadly. Their sound waves will stack. By then, it won't just be shattered eardrums, it'll directly pass through your bones and literally shake your pathetic brain matter into a paste. He pointed outside the door. If you want to live, go to Wrenches Street, walk all the way to the end, and find a small shop with a cicada slough sign. The shop owner is a limping old man named Old Jin. Go find him and buy a pair of special earplugs filled with silent cicada slough powder. Silent cicada slough? Guya heard this name for the first time. It's the shed shell of an F-grade insect bazaar, the silent cicada, found only deep within the Northern District Cemetery, Old man Wang explained. The thing itself is useless, but its shell, when ground into powder, has a property that absorbs high-frequency sound waves. That stuff is extremely expensive, at least 150 credit points for a pair, and it doesn't make you immune. It only helps you reduce the effect of an attack from a swarm of bats to that of a single bat howling right next to your ear. You'll be dizzy, nauseous, and want to vomit, but at least your brain matter will still remain in your head. How you choose is up to you. Guya nodded vigorously, engraving the word silent cicada slew firmly in his mind. 150 credit points. This was practically cutting a piece of his flesh, but he knew this was life-saving money and not a single cent could be saved. Although he could transform into a bazaar, his current mental strength meant the transformation time was too short. To be safe, this money had to be spent. Any other questions? Old Man Wang asked. No, Guya shook his head. He had thought this consultation was over. Unexpectedly, Old Man Wang dragged an old wooden box from under the bed. From it, he pulled out a scratched military dagger, about half a foot long, and a yellowed, frayed piece of folded paper, tossing them onto the table in front of Guya. This knife and this safe route map of the South Ring wasteland, I'm lending them to you. Old Man Wang's tone carried no emotion. The knife, a 100 credit points deposit. The map, a 200 credit points deposit. It'll be deducted from your next mission payment. If you die in there, and the items don't come back, I'll consider that money as buying you a coffin. Guya was stunned for a moment, then picked up the paper. It wasn't an official printout, but a hand-drawn map, marked with countless symbols and warnings in different colored pens. Don't expect this to be some high-tech gadget, Old Man Wang snorted coldly. This is a survival map that a long-dead old scavenger, with his life painstakingly charted step by step in the wasteland outside our South District. The one I have is a tracing. It marks all currently known deadly pits and hiding holes. He heavily tapped the marker on the map, leading to Subway Line 3 with his finger. This map can only guarantee that you can walk to the entrance of Subway Line 3 alive. As for what happens after you go inside, whether it collapses or a new wall appears, that's entirely up to your own fate. He paused, then raised his eyes, his cloudy gaze fixed on Guya. Remember, don't fully trust the map. Pay close attention to the walls. Surviving scavengers will use white stone powder to mark the latest safe routes. Understood. Guya looked at the two items in his hand, then at Old Man Wang's stern face, and suddenly understood everything. This was a favor from the gray millstone. He didn't act coy, but solemnly put away the dagger and the map. I understand. He stood up and bowed deeply to Wang Zhengguo. Thank you, Captain Wang. Old Man Wang didn't look at him again, just waved his hand impatiently. Get lost. Before I deduct your 300 credit points, come back alive. Coming out of Old Man Wang's dormitory, Guya's palms were covered in sweat. This was his first solo mission. He didn't go home immediately. In his hand, he tightly clutched the heavy military dagger, which had a 100 credit points deposit, and the map, which was more precious than 600 credit points. This 300-point debt of gratitude weighed on his heart like a mountain. He turned and plunged into the labyrinthine alleys of Rust-Bone Street. He needed to procure equipment. Following Old Man Wang's guidance, he didn't go to Wrenches Street, but instead took several turns, arriving at a more secluded and quieter alley. At the end of the alley, there was a small shop, so small it didn't even have a sign. Only a simple curtain made of dried cicada sloughs hung at the entrance. Guya pushed aside the curtain and entered. The shop was filled with a scent mixing herbs and insect exoskeletons. A white-haired old man with one leg, replaced by an old mechanical prosthesis, sat on a small stool, slowly grinding an unknown bone. Buying cicada slough earplugs. The old man didn't even lift his head, asking in a hoarse voice. Yes, Guya nodded. 160 credit points for a pair. No bargaining, the old man said succinctly. 160, why did the price go up? But he didn't haggle. He knew this was life-saving money. Okay. He deducted the expense from his personal terminal. The old man fumbled under the counter, pulled out a small package wrapped in oil paper, and tossed it over. Use them sparingly. These things last about 10 times. Once they absorb too many sound waves, they're useless. Don't be cheap and buy those Butcher Gang knockoffs made with noise worm mucus. Don't say I didn't warn you when your brains start flowing out of your ears. Guya carefully tucked the soft-feeling special earplugs into his chest. Account balance, 730 credit points. Coming out of old Jin's shop, Guya felt his heart bleeding, but he didn't stop. He went to the pile of old papers and, from the old man who sold second-hand goods, spent 30 credit points on an old-world wind-up alarm clock. Account balance, 700 credit points. This thing was loud and harsh, making it the best noise generator. Then he went to Wrench's territory. This time, he didn't dare enter the largest shop, but instead went to a less conspicuous small shop, where he spent 80 credit points on a second-hand canvas tactical backpack and another 20 credit points on a 10-meter coil of nylon rope and a few spare batteries. Account balance, 600 credit points. In just half an hour, nearly 300 of his credit points had evaporated like this. This feeling of money flowing like water gave him a deeper understanding of the risks of this mission. Bounty hunters really earn money and burn money? Back in his dormitory, he finally felt a sense of security. He spread all his belongings on the cold concrete floor. A detailed map with a 200 credit points deposit. A sharp military dagger with a 300 credit points deposit. A pair of silent cicada slew earplugs that cost 160 credit points. An old alarm clock for 30 credit points. A backpack, rope, and batteries for 100 credit points. A backpack containing 7 nutrient paste tubes and a canteen of clear water. A company-issued, dim flashlight. And hidden within his body, 2 F-grade transformation cards and 1 F-grade armament card. This was all his capital for his first hunt. And his personal account only had 600 credit points left. Gu Yi sat on the floor, under the dim light, studying the map over and over again, engraving every cautionary note marked on it into his mind. He also replayed every word Old Man Wang told him in his mind, envisioning all possible accidents and his corresponding solutions. He didn't know how much time had passed. When the clamor of Rust-Bone Street outside the window was gradually replaced by the dead silence before dawn, he slowly stood up from the floor. He hadn't slept all night. In the past, he would have been dizzy and muddle-headed by now. But strangely, at this moment, apart from his eyes feeling a bit dry, his brain was exceptionally clear and focused. He could feel that since his mental strength limit had increased to 20 points, the benefits were not just a longer mana bar. More importantly, his energy, attention, and thinking speed had all been tangibly enhanced. This, perhaps, was the most precious and fundamental capital the bizarre compendium had given him. He walked to the table and began to methodically pack all his equipment into his backpack. His movements were steady, but the slightly trembling fingertips betrayed his true inner emotions. He wasn't unafraid. On the contrary, when he tucked the cold military dagger into his waist, when he hung the 734 identification tag, which represented responsible for one's own life and death, around his neck, a shiver, a mix of excitement and fear, like an electric current, shot up his spine all the way to his crown. His heart pounded in his chest. A fine layer of cold sweat also seeped into his palms. He was about to face, alone, those monsters he had only heard about in textbooks and from teammates. There was no Old Wang to take the lead for him, no Monkey and Zio Chi to draw fire for him. Only himself. He walked to the cracked mirror and put on the newly bought gas mask that blocked all strange smells. In the mirror, a young man in gray work clothes, carrying a canvas backpack, with most of his face covered by the mask, was silently looking back at him. In the eyes reflected in the mirror, his own eyes, he saw nervousness, unease, and even a hint of deep-seated fear. But he didn't flinch. He just took a deep breath at his reflection in the mirror, then slowly exhaled. When he looked up again, all the emotions in his eyes had been forcibly suppressed. In their place was a cold, machine-like focus. He was not a born warrior, but this damned world was forcing him to learn how to fight. He pushed open the door and walked into the perpetually dim corridor of the hive. Chapter 20, South Ring Wasteland. It was still dark, but the South District was already alive. However, unlike the alcohol and hormone-fueled clamor of the night, the South District before dawn belonged to a different kind of people. Men and women, carrying heavy packs, their eyes wary and silent, emerged from the hive apartments and various dark corners, merging into the streets like fish swimming upstream, heading in the same direction. The South District's main gate. They were scavengers and bounty hunters, just like Gu Ye. The daytime belonged to the odd jobbers who sold their labor in the flesh market and black factories. The nighttime belonged to the drunks lost in their dreams in the taverns, but the deepest darkness before dawn belonged to these desperados who ventured out beyond the wall into the true, contaminated zone, exchanging their lives for money. Guya blended into the crowd, saying nothing. He clutched his canvas backpack, his other hand never leaving the hilt of the military dagger at his waist. Everyone was silent, save for the rustling of equipment and the heavy sound of footsteps. They did not take the scrap iron train that connected the 4 major sectors, because their destination was just outside the South District. The crowd passed through the entire Rust-Bone Street and finally arrived at the southernmost edge of the South District. There was no heavily guarded purification station or Iron Dragon highway like in the East District. There was only a relatively simple South 6 gate, guarded by the garrison troops, specifically for C-Ring Zone residents to enter and exit. Beeps. Gu Yi, imitating the person in front of him, swiped his ID card on the turnstile at the entrance. Identity, outer wall resident. Clearance, entry-exit permitted. Accompanied by the cold mechanical prompt, he walked out of the huge wire mesh gate. The moment he stepped out of the gate, the world instantly felt different. Behind him was the C-Ring Zone, a home filled with struggle and clamor for everyone. Although chaotic, it was at least protected by the reality-stabilizing anchor's force field of over 20%, making it difficult for aberrations to form. Before him, however, was a dead silence. This was what Old Man Wang's map had marked, the South Ring Wasteland. It was the suburb of the South District before the Great Fracture. Now, it had become a proving ground for countless novice scavengers. Gu Yi saw a few scavengers in the distance, hunched over like hyenas, rummaging through the ruins of a collapsed building. Further away, a better-equipped scavenger squad was gathered around the remains of a 30-year-old car, seemingly dismantling some parts. Although this area was safe, it had clearly been licked clean countless times by countless people, leaving little of value. Guya took out the hand-drawn map Old Man Wang had given him, then looked up at the high wall in the distance to orient himself. The map showed that Subway Line 3 station was not far from here. It was less than 2 kilometers in the correct direction. Then he pulled up his gas mask, tucked his scavenger ID tag into his clothes, and plunged into this silent wasteland. He did not take the main road. Instead, he moved quickly, strictly following the map's marked, safe alleys and the shadows of buildings. On the walls, strange symbols drawn with white stone powder were visible everywhere. A downward arrow meant, "There's a cellar here, good for hiding." A crossed bone meant, "Dead end, dangerous." These were the blood and tear maps, drawn by countless scavengers with their lives in these ruins. After traversing for about half an hour in this highly tense state, Guya finally stopped in front of a huge sunken plaza marked on the map, obscured by a half-collapsed commercial building. In the center of the plaza was a dark, huge, square entrance. Above the entrance, several large metal characters, long rusted and broken, could still be seen. Iron, line 3. He found it. This was his destination for this trip. Guyi did not go down immediately. He found a sufficiently secluded, dilapidated room on the second floor nearby. Through a broken window, he lay there, quietly observing the entrance below. After a full 10 minutes, confirming there were no signs of people or anomalous activity around, he slowly took out all his equipment from his backpack. The cold military dagger was tucked reversed into the most easily accessible position behind his waist. The old-fashioned alarm clock was fully wound and placed in the outermost pocket. He checked the flashlight's batteries, confirming they were fully charged. Finally, he mentally reviewed his plan once more. Old Man Wang's words still echoed in his ears. Echo bats are communal, have a bat king, and possess excellent hearing. He had 2 objectives for this trip. The ostensible goal was the silver lighter, worth 600 credit points. Although this money wasn't enough to buy even the cheapest gun at Wrench's shop, it was enough to keep him from worrying about rent and food for the next half-month. This was a crucial initial capital for him to try and accumulate wealth. But there was another, more important, true objective. Containment. He wanted to personally verify if he could independently complete a containment of a new anomaly in this perilous contaminated zone. This was the fundamental reason he left the company and embarked on this unconventional path. Earning money was for living better, but unlocking the codex and gaining power was the only guarantee that would allow him to survive in this fucked-up world. I can't fight head-on. Guya told himself, my advantage is information, it's stealth. His tactics were simple. Step 1, reconnaissance. First, a preliminary exploration of the map station. If he encountered danger, he would immediately transform into a skeletal hound. Using its non-living entity characteristic, he would gamble on whether the echo bats would ignore a pile of walking bones. Step 2, if the skeletal hound could be ignored by them, then he would let it silently try to find the lighter, then assess the containment conditions and see if he could contain it directly in one go. This was the most perfect outcome, and if it was discovered, then he would retreat immediately, and this exploration plan would be declared a failure. After all, he hadn't taken any professional tactical courses. This was the most feasible and also the most cowardly plan he could come up with. He could always give up. There was no need to risk his life for 600 credit points. He took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the slight tremor brought on by nervousness.